What's going on, everyone? Andrew Bogut here, just announcing we are branching a part of the Rogue Bogues podcast into the standalone In Conversation series. So Andrew Bogut's In Conversation series. So hopefully you stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the page. It'll be separate. We heard your suggestions around splitting the basketball and all the other stuff. So we're going to branch this one off into its own show. We're going to get a bunch of interesting people on, not just sport, but politics, and had a great first guest. Want to have discussions about anything and everything, controversial or not, disagreements. We'd love to get, politicians from both sides of the aisle on at times, coaches, athletes, whatever it is. And if you have any suggestions for us for people we should have onto the show to have a long form discussion, which I think is lacking in Australia, to have open, honest conversations about different issues, which I think is very important for us as a nation moving forward. So please support the page. You'll see it everywhere over the next little while. And like, subscribe, jump on our YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and support the show. Thank you. Welcome to the all-new In Conversation series with myself, Andrew Bogut. We've obviously spun off from the Rogue Bogues series to try and have in-depth conversations with people that I find interesting, hopefully you find interesting, about a number of different topics, controversial, good, bad, ugly, and just have open conversations with I think is lacking in Australia. But Senator Malcolm Roberts, you're our first guest of the new spin-off show. Welcome, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about many topics.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Andrew. It's good to be here.
No worries. And
I must say, I've got to admire your posts on Twitter, or X, I'm sorry. So we've reposted a lot of them because they're on target. Yeah,
vice versa. I've followed you probably for the last 2 or 3 years on Instagram and Twitter, and mainly the clips that you do when you're in the Senate. And I found some of them humorous, some of them good, and just some of them edgy. Just the fact that it's a no-nonsense approach, and that's what we'll get into a little bit later. But before we start, I just want to get into kind of the Senate and how that all works, just for people. A lot of our listeners probably will be like, well, what's the difference between an MP or a local MP or someone in federal parliament, all that kind of stuff. People that haven't taken a civics class in high school, just break down kind of how that all works, how you're voted in, how you can move the needle, the difference between your role to, say, obviously the Prime Minister or a state premier or a local MP, and how kind of you can kind of influence things in politics in Australia.
Okay, well, where do you start? That's a big one, Andrew. First up, that'll be quite a bit of talking, and I'll have to remember things along the way. Well, you worked and lived in America, so you know the school system there. I don't know if it's still the case, but it used to be very strong on civics, Constitution, history, not which party to vote for, but how to vote, how the elections take place, which I think is fundamental. And we don't do that in this country, and I think that's deliberate because they want to keep the population dumb. So it's very important to understand that I'm a member of Parliament as a senator. I'm in the Senate, but I'm not part of the government. A lot of people say, well, you're in the government. You sort this out. No, I'm not in the government. So what happens is we've got two houses of Parliament. One is the House of Representatives, the lower house it's called, and the Senate, which is called the upper house. And the Senate is sometimes called the House of Review. So we're a parliamentary representative democracy. So we have a parliament. It's filled with representatives who represent the electors, the citizens of the country. So the House of Representatives is based upon electorates around the country, or some people call them seats, of about 110,000 people in each seat, 110,000 voters, in each seat, Andrew. So they form an area in each locality. There's several in the Gold Coast, there's several in Brisbane, several in Queensland. I think there are 30-odd in Queensland for the Federal House of Reps. So what the idea there is that if they elect a representative, then that representative should be going out and about in that electorate and finding out what people want and then speaking up on their behalf. Right. Because you can't have 27 million people in Parliament.
Yep.
Although I think there's a very good case for having a lot more referendums where we consult the people and have direct democracy. And remind me to talk about citizens-initiated referendum. So that means we have the House of Representatives, which is elected to represent the people in each district, one person per district. And whichever party has the majority in the House of Reps forms the government. That's the way the Westminster system works. And the Westminster system is the British system. We also, our founding fathers, did a very good job of going around the world and listening to various people and different ideas before they put together our constitution. We've got a very, very good constitution. It's not perfect, but it's good. No constitution can be perfect because you just can't cover every situation. So they stole an idea from the Yanks, the Senate, which is actually stolen from the Romans, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The Senate is the upper house, and the Senate has a different electorate system. They have, each state is electoral, is an electorate, and each state elects at each election 6 senators to represent them. So, and the elections are staggered. So the House of Representatives is every 3 years. The Senate is every 3 years. Half the Senate is due for election.
Okay. Yep.
So that way they don't change it all in one hit.
Yep.
So you get some continuity, and I think that's a really smart move. So there are 12 senators for each state, and the reason, the other name for the Senate is sometimes called the States House,
Mm-hmm.
because when the Constitution was, when the Federation was first formed, we had New South Wales and Victoria, which dominated, and if they'd had no upper house, no Senate house, no Senate, no States House, then New South Wales and Victoria could have ganged up on the rest and done whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
Right. So the little states wanted protection, so they came up with the idea of the Senate, and that meant that each state, from little Tasmania, which has about 400,000 electors, to New South Wales, which has about 8.7 million people, they had the same power.
Yep.
So they couldn't gang up. Now, the Senate is elected in each state based upon the whole electorate. So 5.5 million Queenslanders elect 12 senators. 500,000 or 400,000 Tasmanians elect 12 senators. So if you get, say, a party with 30% of the vote, theoretically it would have no House of Representatives members at all. So it wouldn't be that means you wouldn't be representing 30% of the population.
Yep.
But in the Senate, it's proportional representation. If you get 30% of the votes, you get 30% of the senators.
Okay.
So the Senate becomes, so that most legislation is initiated in the House of Representatives. And by the way, that's a comment I make very, very clearly. There's far too much legislation in this country. It's choking the country.
Yep.
So then once it's passed, the government introduces it. It usually has the numbers. So it passes through the lower house. Then it comes into the Senate where it's reviewed. Its committees are formed to investigate the legislation. Then it's debated. Amendments are made. And then if it goes through in full, it's just passed and it goes to the Governor General for legislation. It becomes legislation. If it doesn't go through in full and it's amended, it goes back to the House of Representatives and they tic-tac backwards and forwards. And that's basically the way it works.
Yes, you're obviously a stop. With all these bills, you're kind of the end, apart from most of these bills being approved or edited, correct?
Correct. It's a democracy, and we came very close to having 5 senators last time, so we've only got 2. So the balance of power is extremely important. And at the moment, the Senate, for a bill to pass through the Senate or a motion to be passed or approved, it has to have half plus 1. So there are 76 senators,
Yep.
So that's 38. So you need 38.
39.
If it's 38, it fails.
Okay. So you got to be.
So what happens is the Albanese government is essentially working on the Labor senators plus the Green senators plus David Pocock, and they work together to look after each other to stop the government being held accountable. And I literally mean that, to stop the government being held accountable. We've moved many motions of order production of documents for the government, and Pocock, the Greens, and the Labor Party conspire to knock that out.
Yep.
So they also conspire to stop debate. For example, the Digital Identity Bill, which is one of the most far-reaching bills in the country ever, was pushed through without one word of debate. So they can stop debate, and they can also then approve legislation because they gang up together.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense. And you also are involved in hearings where you do get to question and prod.
Oh, right. Yeah, the Senate has an excellent feature, which is the committee structure. Mm-hmm. And we've got 8 committees, and they're basically the government. A government senator will lead each of the 8 committees on the legislation. So when legislation comes in, they investigate legislation, they hold hearings, Andrew, where they will put out a notice saying this particular bill has come in to the inquiry. and we call on submissions from anyone in Australia. That's where citizens can have their say. And then out of those submissions in writing, they will invite some people to come and do testimony. The opposition usually is in charge of those. It chairs that. They usually balance numbers, chairs that, and they can do investigations into just about anything.
Yep.
And then,
do they go anywhere? I mean, that's I think by the Woolworths CEO, there's been different people that have been grilled by yourself. I think Qantas was on there for a bit, and you watch some of these, and I've seen yourself and other senators at these kind of grillings, as I call them, and you just don't get. You're asking a simple question, and it just goes around in a circle with answers. I guess for the general public, it's like, are there consequences for when they go to these hearings and these people are caught up for not?
Well, I didn't mention the third category of hearings, and that is Senate estimates. Mm-hmm. So when the government lays down the budget, which is coming next week, a week or so after that, they have 2 weeks of hearings where each of the committees invites anyone we want from a federal agency to come and give testimony. They're invited to give a statement, and then we ask questions. That's where we can grill the bureaucrats and the ministers.
Yep.
And that is usually pretty effective, but there are many tricks. Sometimes people are saying, "Oh, won't that bastard answer the question?"
Yeah.
And some of them, Andrew, are literally trained to not answer questions. They've gone to courses for that purpose, to not answer questions, to be seen to be almost answering it.
Yeah, I refer back to what the minister said, or I refer back.
Can I take that on notice?
Yeah.
And you don't expect them to know everything, so we can accept them taking things on notice. But what I want to assure people there is that sometimes we get answers straight away. Bang, good, that's what we want. Sometimes we get lies, and sometimes we pursue those lies to expose the lies in that hearing, but there's only limited time, 5 to 10 minutes. Yep. So sometimes we'll just pocket the lie, and we'll bring it up next time. Said, last time you said this.
Yeah.
The fact is this, isn't it? You're basically lying. Or sometimes it's, in the case of the Murray-Darling Basin, it took us 3 years and 3 sets of hearings each year to eventually to prove that point. So we don't give up sometimes. We don't necessarily give up just because we've got a shitty answer.
Initially, yeah.
Yep. So sometimes we take the questions or the answers on notice. That's where the bureaucrats or the ministers will say, okay, I've got to do some work on that one to find out the data because I can't remember everything in my head.
But is there I guess, what are the consequences when you've caught them in a blatant lie and trying to deter from what the truth is? And it seems like your average punter's just like, oh, they just lie and nothing comes of it.
Average punter's right, believe me. The average punter's got more sense than most of the people in Parliament.
So what? Are there no consequences? You got CEOs of companies going on there blatantly lying, caught in a lie. They take it on notice, come back a month or two later, and be like, you blatantly lied here. We've caught you. Yeah, I have. What's a recourse? Is there no recourse?
There is a recourse. It's a very good question. The Senate has the power to run itself, because if you think about it, that's what should happen. Otherwise, you'd have to appoint someone to be in charge of the Senate.
Yep.
And that would be a perversion of democracy. So the Senate elects a president, which is usually the majority party, it's the government, even if they're a minority. So the Senate makes rules on how it conducts itself. So if you tell a lie in your opening statement as a witness, if you tell a lie in a response to a senator's question, that's contempt of the Senate. And there are severe penalties for that. And we find that most people don't actually lie. Some of the public servants come very, very close.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a matter then of trying to frame the question in a way that they have to answer yes or no.
Hang themselves, correct?
That's right, and that happens. So it's a very serious issue. Before every witness starts his or her opening statement, Andrew, they're reminded that it's if you tell a lie, it's a contempt of the Senate. And if someone else puts pressure on a witness to tell a lie, then they can be held in contempt. And we're told there are prison cells in the basement of the Senate. Now, I don't
cobwebs in them.
Yeah. So strictly speaking, we can, and I think someone has spent a night in jail down there many, many years ago, but it's a high bar to cross.
That's what I was going to ask you. When's the last time someone was held in contempt and it was known that, hey, this is unacceptable behavior where, you don't hear about it in the media. We don't hear about it. Like, surely there's been a lie told in the last 12 months alone, and going through COVID and the vaccine mandates and all that kind of stuff. There's surely been blatant lies, and it seems like there's,
I think there have been, but it's like a court of law. You've got to be able to prove it.
Okay.
And what they do is they're very, very clever. Like, for example, the TGA, Therapeutic Goods Administration, the ATAGI, the Department of Health, they've been abysmal.
Yeah.
You know what they're like with COVID. I mean, it's just been it's homicide, and they're getting away with it at the moment. But what they do is they're very close-knit group, some of these people, and they're protecting themselves. I believe that the Federal Health Department and the other TGA is riding shotgun for Big Pharma.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's abundantly clear.
Yeah.
So Big Pharma will protect them, and Big Pharma looks after the money for grants and for research. So if you're an academic, where's your money coming from? So that's why we know right from the start in COVID, there were some people in the University of Queensland, academics, senior academics, highly respected in the country. They said, this is totally wrong. But they weren't game to come out and say that right then, because they will get smashed reputationally. So what they have to do is they have to go out and get scientific papers to back up what they're saying. So that takes some time. When many of the academics are funded by Big Pharma, they won't dare speak up. So the whole system is basically corrupt.
Yeah, and you can't act fast in those instances. You can't have an instant solution, because, like you said, you got to commission a study, go through what some of these studies take months, if not years. So to get a quick answer, it's basically locked up in.
Look at the lies they told about ivermectin. Never in the history of our country has a thoroughly effective, proven, safe, affordable drug, and known to be very, very safe. 4 billion doses around the world, been discredited and withdrawn by the government.
Yeah.
And hydroxychloroquine, again, withdrawn. That's immoral. That's inhuman. That's homicide. Ivermectin could have stopped this COVID in no time, as it did in India and other places where it was used. Africa, it prevented a lot of disease. So somehow you've got to then get the evidence out. Now, Pierre Corey in America is a fabulous doctor, and he went out on a limb, threatened with deregistration as a doctor for pursuing ivermectin. And bit by bit, over the years, took him 2 years, he developed a list of around about 100 papers scientifically proving that ivermectin is effective and safe. Mm-hmm. But by the time the TGA lies about it and the others lie about it, the horse has bolted. So it's now coming back. So that's why so it's very difficult to get proof sometimes at the time.
Exactly.
But we will hound these bastards down.
Yeah, I want to get to that later on. But yeah, it's funny you use the analogy of the horses bolted because it was a horse. it was labelled as a horse dewormer and a horse drug, which is interesting because it's being used mainly for malaria, right? Overseas
it was developed for humans.
Yeah, for decades.
Won a Nobel
and
Prize.
a very cheap, accessible drug. So obviously you put 2 and 2 together around Big Pharma and what they're doing with the vaccine stuff. It kind of, when you think about it that way, but it was also the media push around. Joe Rogan famously took it, and then they changed the color of his skin after he took it to make him more orange. Just stuff like that. The media push around really labeling it as a alt-right conspiracy and saying that you're taking horse medication and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of lit a light bulb with me, like, oh, maybe this is right, because as soon as the media goes hard on some of this, name calling and all that kind of stuff, it really makes you scratch your head. But
so just on that, this is how they can. I call it lying. They're misrepresenting deliberately. So we said, why won't you? So I said, I think it was the TGA, or the chief medical officer. Why won't you let antivirals be used? Because it was just the injections. And they said, you can use antivirals. We just approved a few. Remdesivir is one of them. You know what they call remdesivir? Run, death is near. I mean, it's a homicidal drug that's just killing people in a lot of agony. And they're saying you can go and use that. Now, who produces remdesivir? Big Pharma.
Yeah, of course.
At thousands of dollars per dose.
Yeah.
So they wanted to suppress ivermectin and keep remdesivir to the market and the injections to the market, and that's what they did. They banned ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine.
Quickly too, might I add. Yeah, it got withdrawn pretty quickly, considering a lot of the stuff takes time to usually go through the right process. That just disappeared on a whim. But we'll get to that shortly, a bit more in depth. But I mean, in your opinion, where is Australia today? What's going on in Australia? I mean, we look at there's constantly items passed or at least, approved that the public don't vote for, that just get squashed through. You look at the yes/no vote, which happened over the last 12 months. You see the country
on the voice,
the yes vote, and you see it obviously being heavily towards the yes. And then only months later or within a year, you've got states now pushing it through anyway.
And councils.
Yeah. And you got, I think Adelaide, I think South Australia is a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think WA already kind of had a similar type policy towards treaty and that kind of stuff. I guess my question is, how can that happen? I mean, most people, myself, like to look at myself as an average punter when I look toward politics is, why can't we vote on these kind of things? Why can't we have a vote on digital ID? How are these things just pushed through? And then secondly, when we do have a referendum, they still get pushed through just in a strategically different wording or different way. I mean, how is that a democracy?
This is another long answer coming up, Andrew. But you said
that's what we want. We want
conversation.
Yeah, we want conversation. We want. I want to know, and I hope the listeners do, because I think these conversations are important. We don't get these in a 2-minute piece on the news or Q&A or even Sky News where it's, all right, off to our next guest, give us your 1 minute spiel. These aren't 1 minute conversations. So if this takes 30 minutes, I mean, by all means.
So democracy is where the people are represented either directly through a vote on everything, like you said. Every citizen there's a referendum on every citizen voting on everything, or you have a representative democracy where a representative democracy is too unwieldy to do the other. But in Switzerland, they have what's called citizens-initiated referendum. So some pieces of legislation, the citizens actually, they can sign a petition saying we want to repeal what you bastards in the government have enacted, passed as legislation. And they can do it, I think, with about 5% of the signatures, 5% of the population signing, right? So that's good. So the moment they get that, they then enact a referendum on that piece of legislation. Do you want to keep it or do you want to get rid of it? And if the population says get rid of it, it's gone.
Just a 51% majority, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And similarly, if you don't, if you're a politician who's behaving poorly, then someone can move a petition and get signatures and then have a vote as to whether or not Malcolm Roberts should still be in the Senate because of his behaviour.
Yep.
And they get rid of him if the population votes. Now, it's very interesting. I had an older lady who was a friend of my parents many years ago when I was probably at 30 years of age. Auntie Betty was her name. She was in her 60s and never interested in politics. And she went to Switzerland one day, came back, and I asked her and her husband, what do you think of Switzerland? And I was expecting her to say, beautiful scenery, wonderful people, friendly, orderly, clean, tidy. And this woman, not interested in politics, said, the politicians are responsible.
Kept in check.
And I went, what? And then I learned about the citizen-initiated referendum.
How long has that been?
Been there quite a while. The other thing that I learned subsequently, Andrew, and this is important, I think, is that the federal government in Switzerland is it's a federation. They have cantons, we have states. The federal government in Switzerland is a mess because they don't give one party in dominating. Mm-hmm. And they sometimes have to have a coalition of parties, like about 8 parties, I'm told.
To try and get things done, yeah.
You can imagine what that is like.
Yeah.
So the federal government, the central government, gets very little done in Switzerland. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
What's happened in America and Australia is they deliberately set up for the same reason that the federal government has minimal powers. The majority of services, the majority of powers are with the states.
And we saw that just quickly during COVID, blatantly, right? When a lot of this stuff was going on, you really started to realise the power a state premier has compared to the Prime Minister.
Yes and no, because the Prime Minister has the money power.
Yep.
Okay, so it's another good example of how one person can dictate. The other benefit of having a distributed, decentralised form of government, like the states having the power to do most of the things, is you can't have a foreign power like the World Economic Forum or the United Nations influencing directly all the states. It's just too unwieldy.
Okay.
But you can easily do that through the federal government. And then the federal government, for example, education is a state responsibility. But we've got 4,000 bloody bureaucrats in the education department in the federal government. 4,000, not one school. What they do is they bring in a curriculum that's weighted for the World Economic Forum or the United Nations, and then they make that a national curriculum. And then the states have to comply with it. What we should have, and what is according to our constitution, is each state has the power to do whatever it wants in most areas, except for, say, defence, which is federal,
Yeah.
foreign affairs, maybe
Tax policy.
Well, tax policy is actually state.
Is it?
Yes, that's where I'm coming to.
Oh, wow.
Most of it is state. States can levy taxes. States can levy income tax.
Yeah.
Communications might be another. Protection of borders.
Yep.
Security of borders, immigration.
National security, yeah.
Yeah, those kinds of things. But the majority of things should be done by the states. And the reason for that is this. If one state does a phenomenal job, say, in running its energy sector, then other businesses, it'll end up with cheaper power. Other businesses will go there. Mm-hmm. Then the other states, businesses from other states will go there. So the other states go, we can't have this.
We've got to fix it, yeah.
Fix it. So they get the whole thing ratcheted up. So what you've got is a marketplace in governance. Good government gets rewarded.
Competition, yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So it's the same old story. Competition breeds improvement. And if someone screws things up, people leave that state, like South Australia with their energy policies, people leaving the states, and then Victoria, people leaving. With Dan Andrews, a lot of Queenslanders, a lot of Victorians left Victoria to become to Queensland. You know, there's a story going on that the winner of the Real Estate Agent of the Year for Queensland was Dan Andrews.
Yeah, I saw that.
but that's where states' powers are really important. Now, the states used to have the ability to levy income tax, but they didn't levy it. The federal government came along in 1943, and under the war emergency, Second World War, they took the right to levy income tax. Victoria and I think New South Wales complained, but they lost it in the High Court. Mm-hmm. What's happened over the years, Andrew, same things happened in America. The central government has whittled down the state powers so that the states have less power and the federal government has more power. So we've got a monstrous federal government, which in America is killing the country.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about Biden. I'm talking about both sides.
Yeah.
Same thing's happening here, and there's very little accountability because you've got no one really opposing them.
Yeah.
And in this country, you've got, just like in America, just like in Canada, just like in Britain, just like in New Zealand,
basically
you've got two parties, and they're both pushing the same policies.
Yeah.
But pretending to be different.
Yeah.
So we call it a uni-party. So let's go back. So that's answering the question about the states. That's why it's very important to have more states powers, because you've got competitive federalism. One of the tenets in our constitution is that it is based on competitive federalism, a marketplace for governance, and that works brilliantly. That's been destroyed in our country. So there's now a central government with no real accountability. And remind me to come back to how they did it over COVID. So it's very important for people to understand that at the top of the tree in our country is the citizen, you and I, not a senator, citizen. Malcolm Roberts, a citizen. We're the only country in the world in which the citizens voted for the referendum, voted for the Constitution. The only country. The rest, usually some elite group put it in place, and then the people rally around it. The only people who can change the Constitution are the citizens through a referendum. So we are in charge. And what's happened in our country is that every 3 years we have an election for federal parliament. But because it's just Liberal or Labor, and Mum voted Labor, so I'll vote Labor, or Dad voted.
Football team.
People don't think. And so what the governments have, and then they get the media complicit, because the media is owned generally by globalist supporters. They push the narrative. Yeah. And just before each federal election, you have Labor or Liberal, Labor or Liberal. No one else exists.
And even the amount of spending they have compared to the smaller parties, that's...
Yeah, and they've enacted legislation to stop the minor parties being able to get the money that they access from the taxpayer.
Yep.
So what that means is that the people have been lulled into sleep, because in a parliamentary democracy, we have the vote every 3 years, and we should be holding our governments accountable. But because if Labor's screwing up in government, many people think, oh, well, I just vote Liberal. But they're the same policies, the same bureaucrats, and they're pushing the same globalist agenda. So there's really no alternative, but the people are fooled into thinking there's an alternative. So people are asleep. What we need to have is people who are voting not on party lines, but on character of the candidates, on the policies the candidate's pushing, on the values of the candidate. And then if you had an honest assessment, then you'd have many parties being involved in government, and then you'd have a real debate. At the moment, quite often, things are energy policies. Our country is well and truly being destroyed with electricity. We had the cheapest electricity in the world. Now we've got amongst the most expensive. We're the biggest exporters of hydrocarbon fuels, coal, oil, and gas, and yet we can't use them here. And yet that's what's liberated humanity. So a lot of people think the Labor Party has destroyed our electricity sector. It's not true. The Liberal governments have initiated every single major policy that's destroying our electricity sector. The Labor Party comes in and ramps it up. And so we've got a population that is basically ignorant of what's going on, and they just vote red or blue. The encouraging thing is that when I was a kid, 45% of people would roughly vote Labor, 45% would vote Liberal, 10% would swing.
Minus, yeah.
Okay, they'd swing and they'd determine the government. Then it became 40%, then it became 35%. In 2019, the Labor Party in Queensland for the Senate got about 22% of the vote. Mm-hmm. They only got one senator up.
Yeah.
So it used to be 3 senators for Liberal, 3 senators for Labor in each election. That's 6 senators for Labor in each state, 6 senators for Liberals in each state. And they'd have the Senate locked up, and just 1 or 2 change, and that would give them the power. So the governments were basically Liberal Labor. And they'd nod, wink, wink to each other, initiate bills the other would support. But now we've got a lot more Greens and a lot more independents. And the Greens have been very, very damaging for our country, but at least it's someone other than Labor or Liberal.
Yep.
The sad thing about the Greens is that they push the same World Economic Forum policies and United Nations policies that the Labor Party and Liberal Party do.
Especially
So that's what's happened to our government.
Yeah.
The people are asleep. I used to get interested in politics, but not be actively involved until I've started realizing that they were ripping us off with climate. It's a complete lie, complete fraud. And so I got involved, and that's when I found out how shitty our government is.
But even with the referendum, correct me if I'm wrong, but the yes vote that passed, they still didn't need to be enacted, correct?
Correct.
So the government can still say, all right, you voted yes for this or voted no. We're still not going to do it. What are you going to do?
Well, you've got independent states. Each state is a sovereign entity, okay? So just like in America, each state is a sovereign entity. In America, for example, Kentucky, Connecticut, and a couple of others are called Commonwealths. They're not called state. It's not the state of Connecticut. It's the Commonwealth of Connecticut. So I'm saying that they're really strong and independent in America, but they have been weakened a lot. They were very strong, but they lost the power of raising income tax to the federal government. So the states and the states have also lost some of their powers for education. Health used to be state, but now their federal government drives a lot of things. So that's where Morrison was able to control the COVID response. But they were working together. So there's another point I was going to make in there. There's so many things to say in this. So what we've got is a situation where the states have the power to do things by legislation. But this Commonwealth increasingly has that legislation power over health, education, environment, so many other things that used to be states. But what the federal government did was it stole the right to levy income tax. So we've got now, think about this, managing a company. The money is in the hands of the federal government. The power is in the hands of the state government. And the problems are in the hand of local councils. Mm-hmm. The local councils are controlled by the states, and I think that's the way it should stay. You've got the money in one hand. You've got the federal government handing money to councils. And you've got the federal government making dictates as to what they can and can't spend it on. So who's really running the councils?
Yeah.
The federal government, which is the last place you want it to be run.
Yeah.
So, and then the states do the same. And what happens is that we've got now duplication of money because the federal government is spending money on health and education and environment. The states are doing the same. And a lot of it is just duplication and waste. So it's very inefficient. But the other thing is it lacks accountability because if there's a problem with the education sector, the states blame the feds and the feds blame the states, even if they're the same party in power, because no one takes any notice. And they just get away with it. So what I learned from the climate fiasco was that a very large group of Labor members of parliament thought the climate fraud was bullshit. They just thought it's complete crap, but they went along with the story. Same in the Liberal Party, but that initially was a big majority of people thought it was fraud, but they, bit by bit over the years, fell prey to the media, fell prey to the Greens, and they all came on board. Many of the Liberals don't believe it now. When I speak strongly against the climate fraud, for example, in the Senate, when I walk out into the corridor, Some of the Labor Party senators are patting me on the back saying, and they sincerely mean it, keep going, mate, because they know this is killing jobs.
And by fraud, you mean all the legislation being put forward, all the funding, all the windmills and this and that.
It's huge, Andrew. It's global. It was initiated by a guy called Maurice Strong. Yeah, taxes. A fraud is defined as the presentation of something as it is not for personal gain. So if you present something as it's not, you may be ignorant, or you may be lying, but you're not benefiting. Fraud is when you benefit.
Yeah.
So what's happening here is that the people who raise this in the UN are benefiting enormously from power and also from money. The billionaires are pushing it. They're getting enormous subsidies for this thing, and yet it's never been proven. Never once had they got the evidence. So that's what I mean by fraud.
Yeah, and it's interesting that all these policies, when it comes to climate change and whatnot, at the end of the day, they're hurting your lower to medium income earners generally. The cost of power and enacting all these taxes and all this kind of stuff. And it's funny because when you have these conversations, you'll be labeled a climate denier or something like that. And it's almost like I love nature. I love going out to acreages. I love going out to the beach. I'm not pouring oil in the water. But that's what you label. Like if you disagree with this stuff, it's kind of interesting how far it's moved. That you're not for all these climate policies. You want to pollute the world. It's like no, I don't. I want to keep it clean and keep our waterways clean and all that kind of stuff. It's just the rhetoric that gets thrown at you when you kind of question or disagree with it. And I just think at the end of the day, when you've got a lot of these politicians and even celebrities and whatnot promoting this stuff, and then they're flying on private jets and their wastage their wastage is next level wastage, right? And you're like, you've just used your CO2 emissions a tenfold mine on that one flight per year. Like, so what, you couldn't go on a commercial, you know what I mean? So it's just all that kind of stuff. And that's when I look at the hypocrisy and I start asking questions, is when whatever policy it is, I look at the person and how they're living. If you're not living what you're preaching to the masses, I just disconnect. I'm like, I don't want to hear it. You need to set a prime example. And the same goes to me with Greens. I had a big fight in Victoria when I was about to build a home there, where protesters showed up at the building site, too much soil removal because we're doing a basement, relocation of trees they weren't happy with. This is a sacred site, all that kind of stuff.
Relocation of trees means you are relocating trees.
Exactly.
So you weren't killing trees.
Well, I had to relocate them because they were in the middle of the block. So it's like, we can't build a house.
You weren't killing them, you were relocating them.
But there's all these laws there, and then you look at some of their houses and you're like, how'd you build that? How'd you build that house? How'd you build that mansion? There were trees there at one point. Yeah. And I just felt like I just can't deal with the hypocrisy. And with militant Greens, I'm like, do you have air conditioning? Do you have heating? Or are you living up in a tree?
iPhone?
Yeah, are you living up in a tree if you're living in a tree with no electricity usage and all that, I'll listen to you. I'll respect your message because you're living what you're trying to preach to everyone else. But if you're enjoying all the perks that you're trying to stop other people from having, I'm like, I have no respect for your opinion. You got to show me you're invested in it. Show me you're willing to die for it. If you're going to push it on the general masses that are struggling, especially financially, you see the energy costs just continue to get. Government says it's going to get lower with all these policies around climate and that, and it just continues to climb and climb and climb. And everyday people are just struggling, just to live on the weekly bill payments. You scratch your head on how they're doing it.
That's exactly what we need. We need more citizens involved in the debate and standing up for it. But people are afraid to do that. Okay, but let's get, if you don't mind, we branch off for a minute here, because there's something extremely important that's very, very important to me. There was a paleoclimatologist, a retired professor of paleoclimatology. In other words, ancient climates, and he knew this was all bullshit because he was a true scientist. He's dead now, and he went around the country talking to people and presenting the facts. Complete rubbish. He exposed it as complete rubbish. And so one day he said to me, mate, and I was helping him in other presentations. And one day he said to me, Bob Carter was his name. He said, mate, this has got to be the biggest scam ever. And I said, Bob, it's not even close. Not even close. And he said, what do you mean? He said, look at the money fraud, the way they can print money out of thin air with no reserve backing. That's far, far worse. And he said, yeah, you're right. You got a point there. And then he said, then I said to him, but that's not the worst. The biggest fraud ever is the anti-human scam. He said, what do you mean? And I said, the way they get people about this high, just little infants, in preschool, in primary school, and secondary school, and universities especially, and brainwash them into thinking that humans are evil, greedy, rapacious, uncaring. Now, you relocated trees. You didn't bulldoze trees. But even if you bulldoze trees, that's fine for a house, in my opinion. But you know the value of a tree. Most humans know the value of a tree. So most humans are very, very concerned about making sure they don't have a huge impact on the environment, don't have a huge impact on each other. The fact is, Andrew, that when you and I were born, this is the first and only time when we were similar, but I was that long, when I popped out of my mum, and that's about what you were too. And if you look at a foal when it's born, it pops out of its mum, lands on the ground, and 20 minutes it's sort of stumbling around, and then it gets up, and after about 20 minutes it starts cantering. And then it puts its head down, it starts chewing grass, and it's with the herd within 20 minutes. How long did you take before you could look after yourself?
Yeah, exactly.
And, some parents are not so good, but regardless of whether or not a parent was good or not, the fact that you are sitting here looking at me shows that someone cared for you. It may have been your parents. It may have been a foster parent. I don't know who it was. The hard evidence that humans care is you're sitting here in that chair looking at me. And so humans, and the other thing about humans is that if we've got the basics looked after, cared for, like our kids are going to get another meal, we're reasonably comfortable, then we do take care of the planet. Because Václav Klaus, the president of the Czech Republic, fantastic, he used to be president, a fantastic economist. He said that when the figures show that when a national average income gets to around about $7,500 a year, people change dramatically and they start protecting the environment because they're able to afford to get holidays. They go to the beach, and like you said, there's oil all over the beach.
Yeah,
I'm not going to have this.
Or litter, or yeah.
So we know that people care for the environment, and what the globalists have done is they've switched our focus onto protecting the planet. Now, it gets a little bit not complex but involved because I believe that's the wrong focus. The right focus for me is humans flourishing. Your goal and my goal should be to have humans flourishing, not just ourselves, but everyone. And you're nodding straight away. Now, the amazing thing is that if a mother or a father is in a third world country and they're too busy scratching to get their kid's next meal, they don't care if they shit in the creek.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And you accept that, and I accept that. We don't like it, but we understand that.
They're surviving. Their daily journeys are survival.
Exactly. And when you raise the standard of living to the point where people can get everything raises. But not only that, if you go to the countries with the highest standards of living, you find the highest standards of environment everywhere.
Yeah. Switzerland,
America, because they can afford it.
Yeah.
So you get people also informed. And so what the globalists are telling us is that human civilization and the natural environment are mutually exclusive and enemies. Complete bullshit. Human civilization, for the human civilization to exist in the future, it must protect the environment because without the environment, if it's despoiled, there's no civilization. And to protect the environment helps civilization.
Yeah. Come out, yeah.
So if you want the civilization to flourish in the future, you better protect the environment now. So they're not mutually exclusive and enemies. They're mutually dependent.
And they rise together, right?
Exactly. That's exactly the point. What the globalists are telling us is you can either have human civilization or you can protect the planet.
Which then goes into depopulation conversations, right?
Correct, but I'm thinking more of deindustrialization initially.
Yep.
Okay, so what they're saying is if you want to travel in a jet, if you want a car, God, heaven forbid you want it four-wheel drive, you are being greedy and you're hurting the planet. Complete lie.
Well, it's ULEZ in England, right?
Sorry?
It's the ULEZ cameras, the ULEZ,
yes.
the climate. They've got the climate regions now in parts of London where they you can't
Ultra
drive.
Low emission zones.
Yeah, the low emission zones. Well, they're going crazy over there. They're covering all the cameras, which is actually good to see. They're breaking the cameras and whatnot. But it goes in hand with that. And then, the end game is the depopulation conversation, which a lot of the same people openly have those conversations, that we've got too many people on the planet. We want it down to 2 billion or whatever.
Well, some are saying 500 million, half a billion. But
you go first.
What happened was the United Nations. I used to be in ignorance until I worked out. I'm fortunate in that I got an education that required me to understand atmospheric gases. So when they started telling us about carbon dioxide destroying the planet, human carbon dioxide, not nature's, but human carbon dioxide destroying the planet, I thought, this is crap. So I started researching it. And I'm the sort of person who's logical and has to get his facts together before he opens his mouth. And so I got it together and I thought, this is complete lies. And I was so concerned about it. The UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the science body, supposedly science body, was formed for a political purpose. And it was pushing this out under the name of Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, being a scientific body. So once I worked out the science was bullshit, then I started researching who was pushing it, and that's where I learned about the UN. And I used to be in ignorance about the UN, thought it was just a wonderful group just
protecting countries from
complete rubbish. It's a control mechanism. And then I started looking at who was benefiting from this lie, and then it's the globalist predators, the large corporate, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and the people who own them, as well as other major companies. And so, it's everything that the United Nations and the World Economic Forum does is about wealth transfer and control. They want to control what you and I do. They want to control what citizens do, and they want to transfer wealth from your pocket to the billionaire's pocket. And that's everything they're doing. Then you see the subsidies kicking in. So solar and wind are hugely damaging to the environment, hugely damaging to civilization, hugely damaging to families and individual and small businesses. And yet we're paying money, as you said a minute ago perfectly. Individuals are paying for all of this bad government.
Yeah, it's eroding the middle class, which is similar to what's happening in the US. It's the have not battle. And, there's a whole conspiracy theories about, agenda 2030 or 40 or whatever it is.
Used to be 21, now it's 2030.
Yeah, 2030, but just everyone basically living in their little shanty, little apartment box square in the city, and that's it. That's all you need. Be happy with that little 2-bedroom unit with your 2 kids, and it's wild. But I want to move on to just real quick to small business in Australia. There was an interesting tweet that I saw a couple of days ago. But do you think small business in Australia right now is dead? I mean, I'll read this tweet out to you, which I thought was very interesting. There are no companies, just real estate agents and public servants. Where is the innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship? It's been crushed by taxation and regulation. Everyone is too afraid to do anything because they don't even know what they're allowed to do anymore. So they just clock into the government job, watch the footy on the weekends. Who is creating anything? We have an abundant amount of natural resources, a beautiful and inspirational countryside. We live on a massive isolated island. Australia should be world leading in every field. It should be a utopia of free thought, enterprise, and innovation. But instead, everyone is spiritually crushed by the nanny state. You can't fish or hunt or start a business or speak or build without seeking permission from some goblin in public service, a leech, a parasite, who only exists to suck the life out of you. We need libertas, freedom. Remove the shackles and people will do amazing, awe-inspiring things in this beautiful land. But they can't. They're locked into 30-year mortgages that take away the majority of their take-home pay, slaves to the Commonwealth Bank, just to own 200 square metres of land in Preston. They have nothing left at the end of each month to experiment with, so they're forced to be a wage slave at one of the 8 companies that exist in this country, because it's impossible to run anything apart from a large company in Australia. The small ones can't afford the compliance costs. Nobody understands the thousands of pages of legislation they need to comply with to run a company. We had this amazing opportunity and we fumbled it because everyone voted away their freedoms in exchange for some fake safety. The penal colony never ended. We asked for it. We asked for it to continue, and it did. And that's from John Goddard on social media. I saw that a couple of days ago, and
that's brilliant.
As sad as it is to read, and as it's kind of negative, and then you factor in on top of that the scourge of tall poppy syndrome in this country, which is also another thing. As soon as you do elevate, people want to pull you down, which I think starts from government. But that encapsulates exactly how I see Australia, because I have a lot of friends that run small businesses. Now, you've even got the payroll tax, right? If you're too successful in your business, you hit the payroll tax threshold. So there's a lot of companies that are like, that I know, a lot of small businesses are like, I don't want to get to that point. I'm just going to stay under. So they're not expanding, hiring more people. But that to me is just unbelievable what we've done with this country, which is just so rich in resources and environment, and we have everything in excess. Probably we have probably too much of it, and for some reason, it's just been shut away by bureaucracy and politicians.
That nails it.
Yeah.
Your question was, is small business dead? No, it's not dead. It's still the biggest employer in Australia.
Or dying
but it's dying.
A too hard basket because it's
absolutely, because I'm saying it's not dead, it is dying, and that is entirely accurate what you just read out. And it's deliberate, because if you go back, humans used to live in the Western countries, Britain, for example, and Europe, under feudalism, where the lord of the manor was a powerful individual. He owned the land. And he gave us peasants, serfs, a little bit of land to use, not to keep, but to use. And you toiled all year to keep your wife and kids in food.
Safe and warm.
But the majority of your food and majority of your work went to the lord of the manor. So he got the majority of what you produced. That's a wonderful system if you're the lord.
Yeah.
But it's highly limiting for human progress, because humans, not only do we care, but unique among the animal species, we love in a way that's uniquely human, and we've got that human spirit that connects us all. So you and I are connected. We're not a part of the universe. We're of the universe. We're one with the universe. So we sense that. We also have enormous reasoning skills. No animal has that. We can work things through logically. However, we've got a couple of crippling things. Some people, and it's a very small minority, they want to control others because of their insecurities. And always beneath control there is fear and a need for greed sometimes. But what happens with those people? They tend to want to dominate and control. They're the lords, the feudal lords. And the rest of us, we just want to live with our families and get on and have a bit of fun in life. So what happened was we had a number of things happening. First of all, the Catholic Church had a very strong hold on people. That was broken by the Protestant Reformations. That also caused the Catholic Church to rethink things. So we had a bit of a freeing up of there. It lost some of its control power, and it was being used to control, because Christ, as I understand it, taught forgiveness and love, and freedom from fear, freedom from guilt. But the church is quite often used to present guilt trip. Yes, exactly, and promote fear. If you don't do this, Andrew, you'll go to hell. But then we also had the scientific revolution come along. Up until then, the person with the biggest wallet, the person with the greatest connection to the high priests in the church
network, yeah.
The person with the biggest political powers, closest connection to the kings, the financial clout, the land, he ruled, and you didn't mean a damn thing. But under the scientific revolution, it was no longer who could argue the hardest, who could control people. It was, are you making sense? Is what you're saying factually, is it objective? Is it factually correct? Is it going to help people? If it is, we'll do it. And all of a sudden, the lords lost their power. And then we saw a flourishing of humans in the Industrial Revolution. And sure, there was initially some pollution, but that was because people were ignorant of the impacts of that new technology, right? And the significant thing is, sure, there was pollution, but once people became aware of the consequences, pollution was removed. There's pollution in Chinese cities now, but the Chinese are trying to do something with it. Now, I don't know where you lived in the States, but in Los Angeles, the pollution in the 70s and 80s was terrible. Have a look at it now.
Yeah.
The cars are clean. So humans do something about it. But then we had a dramatic rise in standard of living from about 1850 onwards. And the price of energy decreased dramatically from 1850 right through to about 1996 when John Howard came into power. And his policies reversed that decrease in energy, and energy prices went up, and now we're still living under the shadow of Howard's terrible policies. But energy, if you were a feudal lord, you got your energy from slaves, you got your energy from your serfs. or you got your energy from horses or oxen who did that grunt work. So with a coal, oil, or natural gas, all of a sudden there were no slaves. There were no people being exploited, no workers being exploited. They were working in much safer conditions, had longer lives, easier lives, healthier lives, safer lives, more comfortable lives, had more options, more choices. And they didn't have to work in that manner under that lord or in that valley under that coal mining boss. They could go to the next. If they didn't like that boss or that lord, they could go to another town 20 kilometres away, 100 kilometres away. Some people on commutes every day, 100 kilometres commutes. That gives us enormous freedom. So the freedom was dramatically improved until about the 1990s, and then we started to get wound back by the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. So what they want to do with their energy powers, with their property stealing of property rights, is they want to put us back in feudalism, which is coming back to your point about the small business. They don't want small business to flourish.
They want you to be working for the state or
the state, which is controlled by a few people, or large corporations. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned in that excellent quote, I'd like a copy of that if I could, please.
Cool. Yeah.
But you mentioned working for the corporations and regulations to protect the corporations. That's the first time someone other than I have said that. People think we've got enormous regulations in this country to protect us from the banks. It's complete bullshit. It's to protect the banks from us. The legislation is very complex to protect the banks. It's not to protect us. And so Pauline and I, for example, when I was first in the Senate, we were calling for a federal royal commission into the banking and financial industry. And Morrison, as treasurer at the time, said 26 times there will be no royal commission. Malcolm Turnbull was prime minister. He said 16 times there'll be no royal commission. Well, Pauline, in her usual way, she extracted a Senate select inquiry into lending to primary production customers, foresters, fishers, and farmers. Yep. And she said she wanted me to chair it. So Turnbull gave us that. He thought there's not much we can do about that, So we went out and we went into the bush and we listened to farmers and fishermen and foresters and got them in Senate inquiries, proper submissions, proper witnesses, held them accountable, asked them questions. We got enormous information. Then we said, right, Sydney, Canberra. And we held the banks accountable. And they were so badly embarrassed by what we exposed in public that Pauline's inquiry was about to recommend that number one recommendation was a royal commission into the financial systems. Mm-hmm. And the National Party, thanks to George Christensen and people like that, went to the Prime Minister Turnbull and said, you're going to be very embarrassed if you don't call it yourself. So they called it. Yeah. And then we saw all the shit coming out and all the corruption. Now, what that led to was bugger all. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not one. We had people doing all kinds of huge frauds, multi-billion-dollar frauds. Not one person went to jail. Not one person. No one's been prosecuted. Oh, sorry, a couple of people have been prosecuted, but let off the hook. So, and the legislation had been put in place to make it even more complex so the banks can't get held accountable. So what we've got is corporations leaning on the government, both Labor and Liberal. Labor is as bad with the banks as the Liberal Party. So that is exactly correct. And the reason is it comes back to, again, the people have been asleep because the Labor Party and the Liberal Party just say that to you as a citizen, to me as a citizen. They know that they can get away with it. So if you then see back in the 1990s, in 1998, Pauline Hanson came in and was speaking her mind. But she wasn't speaking her mind, she was speaking what the people were telling her. And she resonated. And in the first election she contested as a party, she was a federal member of parliament, first election that the party contested was the Queensland state election. She got 23% of the vote in the first go, 11 members of parliament. And then Howard's Liberal government and federal and Beattie's state Labor government conspired to get her locked up in jail. People know that. She was locked up in trumped-up charges. So they were so keen to preserve their little...
Yeah, so rattled by her.
Duopoly.
Yeah, 100%.
And so that's the first opposition they've had, and then they had to resort to calling her a racist because if you're called a racist in this country, there's nothing worse.
Well, yeah, we're a prime example of that. Our family, we're Croatian background, migrated from former Yugoslavia, and I grew up and was told by the media that she was racist. So
Yeah.
it was kind of when you're growing up, you're like, oh, she hates immigrants, she hates. So we just thought today, tonight, a current affair told us that, no worries. But now, knowing what I know now about the media and how it works, you're kind of like,
she hasn't got a racist bone in her body.
Let me go back and and I don't think she does. But I was gung ho, like, it was called a wog growing up and all that kind of stuff. You're like, well, racist, look at this racist politician, red hair, up from Queensland. And now I look back and I'm like, oh shit, like there's actually some really good things that she was trying to implement even back then, right? Had she said things sometimes probably that were politically incorrect and whatnot and went a bit hard? Of course, we all do at times, but
you can't shut her up.
Yeah, but you look back and you're like, wow, like she's been painted with this dark cloud and it's still carried to this day. But touching on...
Can I just come back to Pauline, because she heard about me talking about climate and the climate fraud and exposing it. And she said, okay, I need someone strong beside me on the Senate floor. Would you stand with me? And I said, yep. But I said, my first response was, Pauline, I'll check with my wife first because we're together. So my wife said, yes, go for it, because she knew it would be a vehicle to getting the climate fraud on the agenda. And then I said to Pauline, well, my wife said yes, and Pauline said, let's sign up. Then I said, no, I want to talk with you because there's been a lot of shit told about you, and I'm going to do my due diligence. We spent 11 and a half hours one day, and there's no way that the rise that she experienced because she was telling the truth and pushing the people's policies, the rise that she experienced could not have been managed by anyone. There's no living human that could manage that. It was just out of control, and she had wackos and crooks and fraudsters jumping on the bandwagon, and she got side railed.
Yeah.
And then the Beattie government and the Howard government conspired to put her in jail, and to tag her with this tag racist, which the press then took up, because the press don't want the Liberal Labor uni party to be competed with. So that's what happened to her. So, but I went through and realized that she's a very, very genuine person, highly intelligent. And sometimes she's made to look silly because she might mangle her words and trying to get some out. She doesn't mangle them these days, but she's just so genuine and so intelligent.
Yeah, and the minor parties generally will have, they get a lot of these tags are put on the minor parties, cookers or this or that. Even we saw it during COVID, and the more you pay attention to it, you realize, and then you factor in, one of the biggest media spenders, advertising spenders in Australia is who?
Big Pharma.
Big Pharma, but also politically.
Oh yeah,
Liberal and Labor.
Yeah.
You look at the amount of
guaranteed
money,
income.
Yeah,
from tax.
So the media is conflicted, whether they like it or not. You got these journalists saying we're not, we report the truth and this and that. I guarantee you that many journalists and actually beat investigative journalists that have probably found stuff that was pulled, because especially during COVID, because advertising coming.
I was
through.
banned from Sky News.
Yeah,
because of my stance on COVID injections. But there are 8. I've made a list over the years of 8 keys to freedom. The first key to 8 keys to human progress. The first key to human progress. Look how far we've come since the 1850s, and they first started using coal, oil, and natural gas. And oil wasn't until the 1870s. But until that time, if you wanted lighting at night, you used whale oil.
Yeah, you lit a candle, yeah.
Or whale oil.
Yeah.
And then the best friend of whales, they were almost extinct, the best friend of whales is coal. If you wanted cooking or heating in winter, you use wood. The best friend of timber these days is coal, oil, and natural gas. The area of timber in forests in the developed continents is now 70% bigger than it was, 30% greater than it was 100 years ago. That's because of coal, oil, and natural gas. But the first ingredient for human progress is freedom, because if you're free to think, and then you're free to come up with an idea, and you're free to exchange it with me, then I might take it and blow it all up and really magnify it. Then we might go to Trent over there, and he might say, I can make a really good service for people on that. And that develops human progress. We've gone from, in the last 170 years, we've gone from scratching in the dirt, very vulnerable to famines and any storms. Diseases. And look at us now.
Yeah.
Now we've got a problem of wealth and obesity. But that's the first one. So the second one is rule of law. If you've got laws to protect you, then your wealth that you develop in pursuing free ideas and sharing free ideas is protected. Without that protection of the law, if someone can come in and steal your property, why do it? Then the third one is stable constitutional governance, so that when the government gets tired, you can change it without a revolution. The fourth one is secure property rights. Well, John Howard's government stole property rights to comply with the UN's Kyoto Climate Protocol. So we've lost that. So freedom, we've lost that under COVID. We're losing it now with some of the bills that Labor and Liberal are pushing. Second one, rule of law. The law has been converted to twist against the citizens. Constitution has been bypassed in so many ways. The COVID mismanagement was a bypassing of the Constitution. The Constitution is still intact, but it's been bypassed. The secure property rights has been destroyed, and without secure property rights, you don't get innovation, you don't get small businesses. The next one is cheap, affordable, accessible, reliable, efficient energy. They're destroying that. Which we had the best energy in the world. Now we've got amongst the most expensive energy in the world. Went from the cheapest to the most expensive. The next one is families, strong families. The United Nations and World Economic Forum policies have destroyed families. The Family Law Court has destroyed families. It's a slaughterhouse of the nation. So we're killing all 8 of the factors for human progress. The next one is honest money, which is money that's backed by reserves. So when you give me $1, I know that I'm getting $1 worth of gold. It's there. That's no longer the case. Inflation.
What percentage of money the banks have do you think would be available tomorrow in cash in Australia?
I don't know the figures. I don't like to make comments unless I.
We're just guessing.
I'm just a few percent.
Yeah. I reckon it'd be under 10%.
Oh, yeah. I think it'd be well under 10%, Andrew. Yeah. But the last one is taxation system that is fair, efficient, honest. We have got the world's largest multinationals in this country stealing our resources, using our infrastructure, using our people, and paying, what was that you said?
Zero tax.
Zero tax, correct.
But Joe Blow with a local tuck shop.
Small business.
Yeah.
Look at the bloody COVID example. You could get Bunnings. You could go into Bunnings during COVID.
Yeah.
Apparently the virus doesn't go to Bunnings, but they shut down the corner hardware store.
Yeah.
And that's just what they did was they transferred business from small business,
big corp,
to big corporation.
100%. Well, I've got a friend that runs a cafe, and I laughed at this. He told me when he got audited, the auditors come in, and they'll say, all right, your tax bill that you've paid is $60K last year. We're going to put on another $30K on that tax bill for what we think you've got in cash. And he's like, what? And they're like, yeah, well, we know you're a cash.
What?
Yeah, but
just arbitrary without evidence.
Well, they're saying we know you're a cash-based business, but I'm not going to mention who it is. But he's like, he's like, yeah, well, obviously we bring in some cash. So he's just like, it was most likely more than that. So he just paid but that's how to a small business.
But you need evidence to do that.
Yeah, but to a small business. But the problem is this he's like more on the side of, well, I'm probably even a higher tax bill if I really added up all the cash. It might be a little bit above that. So they just pay it. But that's how they even do that to small businesses, right? But like you said, big corp draining all our resources. It's kind of like, oh yeah, free ride. We'll give you rebates.
That man's taxes paid for Chevron, the world's largest. I'm starting to get angry. Yeah. The world's largest multinational tax evader. The number one tax evader in the world is Chevron. They're stealing gas out of our Northwest Shelf, thanks to John Howard's government, and sending it to Japan. We get bugger all for it, and the Japanese get $3 billion a year on import duty.
That's my point. They're going after a little tuck shop.
Yeah, but the tuck shop supporting Chevron with the infrastructure.
It's backwards. It should be the other way around.
But the tuck shop supporting Chevron with the infrastructure that he's paying taxes for to build, and Chevron's coming in and using them for free.
Exactly, where Chevron should be, taxes of that should be helping our small businesses and helping our entrepreneurs that want to come from the ground up and build something. It's very, very, very frustrating. But touching on all that stuff that we talked about, the humanism aspect of things and all that kind of stuff, how they want, basically want slave labor, basically working for big corp.
That's correct.
But you can kind of see how young people are then trapped into the belief of socialism. And we fled a communist. Yugoslavia was communism and all that. So I'm anti-socialism, anti-communism.
So am I.
But I can see how kids are at a university age look at these kinds of things and say, well, shit, like I think everyone should just get the same amount. It should be socialism. And you're like, well, that doesn't work. Read some go through history and read, oh, it's a different kind of socialism is always the answer you get. But I can see how young minds are trapped into that. When you look at things on face value about going down to the working class and just being stuck, maybe they grew up in a commission home or they grew up in these, you know, these suburban areas where you're wall to wall without a garage and you can't even park in your own street. You can see how kids are like, this is bullshit. Like all these rich people, you know, they're the enemy, and they get somewhat manipulated into thinking that socialism, communism is the way. I can understand how they get there. I don't agree with it, and I can debate that with people that want to be communists or socialists all day long, because my family lived in days where you couldn't say you were Croatian back in those days. You couldn't actually had to say you're Yugoslavian. My grandfather got arrested, you know, when you had neighbors taken out of their homes by the military police.
So humans can be cruel. Yeah,
pro-Croatian songs or anything like that. There was no nationalism from the Croatian point of view, but you could be more on the Yugoslavian, which was basically Serbia. Yeah. So there was that whole deal. But I'm sympathetic somewhat to the young kids that are indoctrinated with this shit in high school and university, especially now with the HECS debt, which we'll get onto later, and the debt that the kids have ran up, you know, getting a somewhat worthless degree these days. They get into the marketplace and they've got a gender studies degree that they've paid a shitload of money for, and it's like, where are you going to get a job? So just wanted to touch on all that I can understand it. I totally disagree with all those kind of socialism, communism, all that kind of stuff, but I can understand how young kids get there.
Well, go back to Kevin Rudd when he handed out $900 of taxpayer money, put us in debt for cash splash. What was the reason for that? But we were all given $900. And he said, I have got to save capitalism from itself. We don't live under capitalism. This is not free enterprise we're living in. No, we are living in socialism.
I agree.
And if you want to see the bloody ills of socialism, have a look at Australia. Because let's define it. And I'm testing this. I don't usually talk about this in public, but I'm inviting you to test me. So free enterprise, true capitalism, is where individuals own the resources and the means of production. They own the factory, they own the resources, and they own the right to make the allocation of resources. If I want to put my coal and iron ore into steel to make cars, I can. But if I go bust making cars, someone else will take that steel and put it into household goods or whatever. Or I'll make a shitty car and you'll make a good car and people will buy it from you. I'll go out of business.
Yeah.
Right? But the people do not pay for the failures. Individuals pay for the failures. Individual entrepreneurs, individual small businesses pay for the failure, and they get the reward for failure. So capitalism is where the resources and the means of production and the processes of production are owned by private individuals, and the allocation of resources is by the private individuals, and the private individual survives or dies on whether he or she can meet people's needs better than anyone else. Mm-hmm. And so what you see then is a dramatic increase in wealth in the whole country, not just in the rich, but in the whole country, because needs are being satisfied and people are willing to pay for that. Socialism is where you get the means of production, the processes, and sometimes the resources are owned by individuals. But the allocation is determined by the state, who's got no bloody responsibility for anything. So the mistakes they're made by the governments, but they're paid for by the people because the cost of goods is going to increase because of the mistakes. And also the individual returns to individual businesses is going to decrease. Everyone loses under socialism. It's that simple. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
100%. And a prime example, I don't know if you follow the I Cook Food saga, which happened in Victoria. It's a long story. It's a rabbit hole. I've done podcasts on it. And that's that exact story. A government-run entity had basically ran out.
No accountability.
Yeah, for hospital food and catering, that kind of food, mainly for elderly, like mushed up food and that kind of stuff. The government basically took this small business, which was kicking goals, and
wrecked it
by they actually the council planted a slug on their premises, which has been noted. This isn't alleged. You need to look up this story. It's unbelievable. And I actually know the owner of the business. I'm good friends with him. I've had him on the podcast 2 or 3 times. The story's unbelievable. Like it's
a slug, as in like a snail slug.
A snail slug, and then got them closed on health breaching health restrictions for you need to look up the story. This isn't alleged. This is, and they've basically have never been sued for saying it publicly. That's a prime example because there was a state-run company opening, took them out of business because they basically shut them down for a year. They just shut up shop, trying to fight for their good name. And then this state-run was part of Andrews was health minister at the time. That one's gone under within a couple of years because it couldn't run itself because it was government run and it was just run poorly like most government things. But that's a prime example of what you're saying, where it just the state took out a really good small business and no repercussions.
So under socialism, I'm doing very broad definition here. Under socialism, the means of production, the ownership of the resources is in the private hands, and the state government allocates, or the government allocates the allocation of those resources. They'll say what you can do, what you can't do. In communism, it goes one step worse. The resources are owned by the state, the means of production are owned by the state, and the allocation of resources is made by the state.
Dictated by the state, yeah.
So you have got no private accountability. You've got no competition because the state dictates everything. And so human progress starts going negative.
Yeah.
You start going backwards. And costs of goods and services, if they're available, goes up. The East Germans had a system called the Trabant, had a car called the Trabant. Okay, now in the Second World War, Germany was smashed. After the Second World War, we had East Germany, which was communist, and West Germany, which was private enterprise. Ludwig Erhard, I think it was his name. The Yanks were basically in charge of the occupation forces in West Germany. One day, Ludwig Erhard said, "Piss off." He just told them to go to hell, and he got away with it. And he set up basically private enterprise in West Germany. We now have Mercedes, Volkswagen,
BMW,
Audi, BMW, Lamborghini, which came from Italy but is now owned by them. We had Opel. We had the leading car brands in the world. In the same time, the East Germans under communism, the height of their civilization was a Trabant. It was a small, smelly, high-polluting, inefficient car that was highly expensive, very shitty quality, and was made of paper mache. The bodies were paper mache. You couldn't get any. You had to put your name down if you're a worker for many, many years just to get in line. So here we had on West Germany under capitalism, true capitalism, when they told the Yanks to get out, and East Germany, complete opposite. Which one would you rather live in?
Of course, and entrepreneurship and backing yourself,
freedom,
and a dream. And that's where the US does a decent job, or they have historically, is I think that's where we get into the tall poppy syndrome here, is where we're kind of like, I think Australian mentality, I don't know why it's ingrained in us. I've caught myself doing it before. It's like, we want you to do well, just don't do too well. Whereas in America, it's kind of the opposite, and we look at it as arrogance or overconfidence, but they're like, go get it. That's great.
Yeah.
And I love that from the Americans. When I first got there, I didn't, because I was so ingrained in the Australian culture and mentality of upbringing of like, oh mate, you're a bit too arrogant, you're a bit too this. But then playing in the NBA, I had a player tell me, if you're not your biggest fan in professional sports, no one else will be. And it always stuck with me. I was like, that's a really fair point. Like, because I used to give guys shit on my team, like for being overly confident or cocky or arrogant. But that's what I love about the Americans. They're always aspiring to be more and selling themselves as more, whereas we're kind of like selling ourselves as less. Even like, how's your day? Yeah, not bad. It's kind of that half full mentality, where America, I think, has it right. Do they overdo it sometimes? And is it over? Yes, but I think that's the right way to be treating towards. You'd rather be overcompensating that way than overcompensating on the downturn.
But I've worked and lived in America. I've been to all 50 states. I've studied over there. And when I first went over there to work in the mines, I was blown away by the same thing, Andrew. In Australia, it's a guy's in with the ruck, and he does better with as football, sport, business, whatever, than most people, and he gets to be pretty good, and everyone applauds. Then if he goes on to make trillions of dollars, they tear him down.
Yeah.
But in America, they say, look at where Andrew is.
It's aspiring, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
inspiring. Yeah.
But unfortunately, when I first went there, Reagan had just taken over. And he picked that whole country up. Literally one man did that. I still get goosebumps talking about it. But Carter destroyed that country. And Reagan came along and picked the whole country up by the scruff of the neck and said, now get on with it. And the Yanks just took off. And then we had Clinton, and we had Bush Jr., we had Bush Sr., we had Obama. Now we've got Biden. That country's just getting destroyed.
Yeah, it's not a good
being
place.
Reversed.
But the difference between our nations from that aspect, and like you said, with factoring that into socialism, communism, you want people to be able to aspire to things, and as soon as you have, everything's working from the government, you see everything the government touches is not run efficiently, and people that work for the government aren't the most motivated people for the most part. Look, I don't want to over-label, but you've got your set salary, you do the bare minimum. I deal with councils all the time on properties. I have to get permits for things and this and that, and just getting them out to your property. They're on government. I guess we can make it in a week's time. Like, what else are you doing? What do you mean a week's time? My taxes are paying. I need you here tomorrow to prove this permit for this or do this, and you're just constantly scratching your head because it's.
Have you heard of W. Edwards Deming?
No.
The Japanese, an American who came over from America when after the Second World War, Japan was smashed, and MacArthur was in charge of the occupation forces. And he said to his seniors in America, please send me over some management experts, because we've got Siberia and Russia above me. We've got China to the west of me. They're both communist. Well, China's about to go communist, okay? And they went communist 2 years later. And so the Americans sent over W. Edwards Deming, Joseph Duran, and Peter Drucker, management experts. Now, Deming was so high, and they were all thought of very highly. And the Japanese did what they were told because their backs were to the wall. They were completely smashed. And the Japs thought so highly of Deming that every year the leading company is presented with the W. Edwards Deming Award, the medal. They still do it, apparently. And Deming, I won't go into the details, but he had a marvelous way of getting the data properly and understanding it properly. That was the key to it. But he focused on customers, but in a very strong, pragmatic, objective way. And I won't go into all of that. But Deming was famous around the world for turning Japan around, and then his techniques were taken back to America, and that's what turned America around, manufacturing-wise. But he was famous as a commentator, or he was a grisly sort of bastard, but he said 85% of the problem is in the system. He said, you Western managers, America, Australia, you keep blaming the people. And he said, sometimes you have to because just lack of discipline or whatever. But he said 85% of the problem is not with the people, it's with the system.
Yeah.
If you want to get a very bad, Ludwig von Mises wrote a fabulous book called Bureaucracy, just one word. And he explained in that book why the bureaucracy is inherently wasteful and lacks accountability, and why private enterprise is by far the best system. Now, remember, we don't have private enterprise. We have
the allure of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we have, well, yeah. So anyway, we have this bureaucracy with very little accountability. And the majority of public servants that I've seen are truly wonderful if you free them from that bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. I've seen some private corporations, some large private corporations that are very, very bureaucratic and poorly run. I've seen some public service departments where they have got an inspiring individual at the top, and he's saying to hell with all the rules, just do your job properly and away you go. And they manage to really kick goals. But that is very rare now under both Labor and Liberal. So it's not the public servants that's the problem, it's a system. Mm-hmm. What we need to do is to get rid of most government out of most people's lives and let people get on with the job of living. Yeah.
Speaking of that, it's a great segue into getting out of people's lives. Julian Grant, the eSafety Commissioner, this has been a big topic of discussion. The bill was introduced a couple of years ago. Now it's finally being used. She, over the last month or two, has sent show cause notices basically to Elon Musk to remove some posts that she deemed ineffective. Now, this is the Trojan horse part of it. The safety bill obviously factors in, pornographic material, pedophilic material, all that kind of stuff, which most people would be like, great, perfect, right? But then that can also then become a Trojan horse into other things. So on face value, everyone would agree with that. Yeah, we don't want that on the internet. But now she'd asked for, I guess, footage of the stabbing in the church and Bondi to be removed off social media. Elon had said, obviously, kick rocks, I'm not doing it. it's gone to it's I think gone to federal court. There was a ruling which has been appealed by Elon, but he's since had to take down those posts, which our mainstream media can post. Let's just put that out there. It can be on their websites. They can have stuff from
Channel 9, Channel 7 repeatedly showed that footage.
Ukraine war, Ukraine-Russia war, Gaza, Palestine.
Planes flying into the Twin Towers.
Can show all that, no problem. But for a regular citizen like Trent, myself, if we live stream it, they get a notice to Twitter, get a notice saying take down Trent's video of that. That's not fair. But it just leads me on to say, I mean, this is back to babysitting us. I mean, I think social media, if you are that affected by something going on, as someone who cops probably more abuse than anyone on social media, good, bad, and ugly, I'm sure you cop some of it as well, names and this and that. There's a simple solution: get off social media. You
Just
turn it off, get out, log out. But a government now is saying we're going to help you go on something that's obviously affecting your mental health, or that you're getting, hate mail or tweets or whatever, and we're gonna protect you against those people. It's like, I don't want you to. Like, this is. And it comes back to stop babysitting us, get out of our lives, to now the Australian government and bureaucrats are in our lives in a physical sense. Now you want to be in our lives on an e-sense. And it just, I think it'll come down to even sensitive discussions. This legislation, I have no doubt, will be someone being misgendered. They'll get a notice from the eSafety commissioner saying, Twitter, you need to take this down because Andrew called that person a man when, that man now identifies as a woman. Take that tweet down. It's going to come to that if it already hasn't. And I just think we're in a spot where discussions are important, right or wrong. I think freedom of speech is key to any flourishing nation. And I've always had the mindset of, I want the most extreme views public. That's my opinion, right? My opinion is, if you have an extreme view, I want you to voice it publicly, because then I want Trent and me to say, you're an idiot, shut up.
Yes.
This is why.
You're holding me to account.
And then you might even, you might say, oh shit, maybe Trent's right. Maybe I need to research that better. Maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe what I said was kind of inciting violence or whatever it is. But I don't want the government to do that. I don't want officials to do that. And by the government doing this and censoring people, I want all the crazy shit out there, because what happens if you censor those people that are crazy? Historically, what do you think happens? People start getting attracted to them because they have been censored. And let's say they're banned off social media and they're censored. They're going to form these incel groups. And what happens with incel groups?
Yep.
Terrorism, if someone's got some crazy views, that then they align with another 5 people with those same views. They've got a little group of 10 people that all have the same view. Let's go kill this person, or this person's bad, or that person's bad. There's no one to push back on that. Whereas if it's public and on social media within freedom of speech, you're going to have good people saying, hang on a second, mate, your views are crazy, turn it back, this is why. And I think it polices itself. Now you've got the government,
you nailed it,
trying to police things, and it just always boggled my mind. But I do want to touch on this because One Nation was reported as voting for this. Give us
back in 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah, that went through on the Voices, so I didn't
just explain that for people, because people have fired up and said, yourself, Pauline, One Nation have been big for freedom of speech, and then all of a sudden they're like, hang on, One Nation's involved in this, where it's that they were part of saying, it's been reported as saying they were okay with the eSafety bill going forward.
Well, in Parliament or in the Senate and in the House of Reps, a bill can be debated. Sometimes it's not debated, like the digital identity is not even debated. But it can then be put to the vote after the debate's finished. And the vote is the president of the Senate will say, the ayes move to the ayes, he basically says, anyone who's in favour of the bill say aye.
Yep.
And anyone who's opposed to the bill say nay. Okay? So if there's a loud yell from the ayes, then the president, she'll just say, okay, the ayes have it. Mm-hmm. And even if you're opposed to the bill, you might say, well, we're going to get hopelessly outnumbered here. We haven't got the numbers, so just let it go.
Yeah. Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
That's because you know where you stand most times. Sometimes they're close. But if you think two things, if you think, damn it, I want to put this on the record, or I want to, I don't think that the Senate president has got it right. I think there are more no's than yeses. So therefore I call for division. Now division forces everyone to get off their ass and move to whichever side of the, as you say, all the eyes come to sit on my right, the nose sit on my left. And then we'll count you.
Yep.
Okay. So this went through on the voices. There was no count.
Okay. So the majority was voting for it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the Labor and Liberal Party both voted for it. Okay.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly truthful, I was in mixed emotions about this because you have got to have some protection, like you said, pedophilia. You don't want pedophilia on
no doubt.
Publicly available. There are a couple of other things that some terrorist things.
And the direct threats, inciting violence to kill someone. Of course, you want that off social media. It's a no-brainer. But the problem is with the and so I think social media, for the most part, do a decent job of removing that stuff as much as they can with all the bots and automated stuff coming out. But yeah, like we don't need the government doing it. But yeah,
I'm not going to add to what you said, Andrew, because in this conversation I'm agreeing with you entirely. What I'm going to say is that this is actually a mental health issue. Because, just call me short.
Short.
You're a short ass. Bastard. You're a short ass, Malcolm. Okay. Now, I can say, well, Andrew's dodging the argument here. Because labels are the last refuge of the ignorant, the stupid, the dishonest, the incompetent, and the deceptive, or the lazy. So when you've run out of argument, you'll call me a label, short ass, or whatever it is, okay? Or you'll abuse me. Everyone can see that you've lost the argument.
Yep.
So that's wonderful. But what's really bad is that it's now ingrained in the school system is that I should be upset because you call me short. I mean, it's a fact.
Yeah.
I'm short.
yeah.
Especially when I stand next to you.
When it's factual stuff, of course, yeah.
But the point is it's been turned into an insult. But who turned it into an insult?
You did, yeah.
I did.
Your brain.
I'm responsible for my feelings. And what the government is doing since the 18C came in, is the government has been saying, there, Andrew.
We'll manage your feelings for you.
Yeah. And the government is saying, Malcolm, you're not responsible for your feelings. Andrew is. Your anger, your hurt, your upset, your disappointment, your frustration, all due to Andrew. Let's punish Andrew.
Yeah.
That is causing enormous problems to people who have been insulted, because they're only an insult if they believe it's true.
Yeah, they're victims.
And so we're entrenching a victim mentality, which is a mental health issue. The government is really hurting so many people in this country, whereas I should just turn around and say, yeah, I'm short.
Yeah.
But you won't argue the point.
Yeah.
What are you trying to dodge, Andrew?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think that's the crippling thing there.
Yeah, it's just it's bonkers, and I've instilled that into my kids today, 5 and 7, and
Good.
Whenever they played sport on the weekend, and I finally got to my older one, he goes, one of the kids called me an idiot during the game, and I laughed in his face, and I'm like, it's great, because it's like it's how when someone calls you a word or a bad name, it's how you take it in and you control how it affects you, and that's hard for a kid to understand. But the sooner we can get people to understand that. And I was part of that. I was part of that victim mentality as a young fellow with the WOG word, right? Like I was called a WOG, and I felt victim to it a lot, right? And my parents were victimized by it, so they instilled being a victim somewhat just because we had, that's what we're taught. You can't call us that. That's they're just discriminative. And then all of a sudden, we were thinking that was a thing where it wasn't. Like I didn't get this part of I didn't get access to this first before this person because I'm a WOG, and it's like, well, no, it wasn't. It was just because they were first in line. But then you kind of constantly have that victim mentality, and I've kind of working up to that. No, is there racist people? Yeah, but what it was today compared to 30, 40 years ago, I don't think it's even close.
Racists are insecure.
Yeah, 100%, and that's what I mean. You go down to, it's not I don't think it's a societal issue. I think it's an issue of that guy's a fucking idiot, or that woman's a fucking idiot. Excuse my French, right?
Well, it's I learned very early on in the playground, and I can still remember grade 5, the playground. Someone came up to me and told me a short joke.
Yeah,
and I went, "That's nothing, mate. Listen to this one."
Yeah,
and he was like, "How do I respond to that?"
Yeah,
because it didn't faze me.
Yeah,
but in the process, some people might work that out when they're 25, not when they're 15, not when they're 5. But in the process, you learn. And it's not about being hard or being toughened or impregnable. It's about understanding that your view of me is your view of me. Yeah. It's got nothing to do with me.
Exactly.
Your view of me is none of my business.
100%. Yeah, totally agree.
If we had kids and adults these days thinking that way, they wouldn't
It'd be a better world, yeah. I mean, it's look, the sticks and stones theory rings true a lot of this. Look, like I said, you don't want hardcore mental or physical abuse for no reason, or verbal abuse. But at the end of the day, it's how you take it in, especially with words. And I think the whole words of violence generation, it's you kind of grow out of that when you get a bit older, hopefully.
But you're right. And on the weekend, we had a rally against the digital identity bill, rallies in all the capital cities. And I just look at my notes here. This eSafety commissar, Julie Inman-Grant.
Yep.
I've asked her questions in Senate estimates.
Yep.
And hopeless.
I've seen the video.
She comes in with lots of words, buzzwords, flourishing and flying. And the moment you hold her accountable, she's stuck. She's on about $450,000 a year. She spent $41,000 going to Davos and back. But she demanded that Twitter, as you pointed out, which posted posts critical of trans Teddy Cook be removed. Now, Teddy's a biological female and a member of the UN's World Health Organization's Advisory Committee on Transgenderism. Mm-hmm. Yep. So he's a protected species. Yes. Oh, sorry, she. So Teddy's social media posts and public articles feature bestiality and recommend drug use during sex. Mm. Just remember that. This guy's featuring sex with animals. Now, Billboard Chris, I don't know much about him, but you know about him.
Yes.
Drew attention to the material. Our eSafety commissar, just putting it on the record, sent Billboard Chris a takedown note, as you said, to take down his post, drawing attention to Teddy Cook. This drew more attention to the perversion, so that then 1.3 million people went and saw the post. Yeah. So she's helping stir it along. Yeah. But here's the key point. You can be banned on social media for drawing attention to a person's own words. Mm. But the person on social media with the vile filth and perversion
is okay.
And
be idolized, and be in a position of power.
And then we had another person, he's an Australian, Nathan Livingston. Twitter account is Milky Bar TV.
Yeah, I know, Milk Bar TV. Yeah,
Milky
I know,
Bar,
I know him very well, yeah.
He posted tweets.
And his wife, right?
Critical of Julie Inman-Grant, the eSafety commissar.
Insane.
And his wife then found the eSafety Commission's department had been snooping around his wife's LinkedIn site. So what it means is that you criticize a World Economic Forum operator because she's affiliated with them, and your whole family will be investigated.
And what's crazy about that is his wife is doesn't have a social media presence. Her name's not anywhere. And then LinkedIn, obviously, if you have the paid for membership, it tells you when people have looked at your account. So to see that, I mean, it's just blatantly that's our tax resources going to that salary and that department of fart-filled rooms that will just be sitting there tracking someone's wife who's been critical of them.
Well, I can't get into LinkedIn now because my comments on ivermectin and the vaccine, so I was banned.
Okay,
for a while.
Yeah, I mean, Instagram's the same, Facebook's the same, but it's
the people who are promulgating rubbish are being lionized, and the people who are trying to expose them just comment on them, getting demonized and potentially banned. And now, if Elon wants to keep going, he's going to be huge fines.
Costs a lot of money. And let's just put it out there for everyone that's not aware, Julian Inman-Grant, former Twitter employee pre the Elon Musk era, who has an obvious bone to pick when Twitter was more towards that side of things where they could silence free speech, and all the Twitter files have come out where the government, and now Biden through Facebook and Twitter has put recommendations back 3-4 years ago about deleting and censoring stuff. That's all factual now. You can check it out online with the Twitter files. But
if you come back, Andrew, to what you're talking about with the bishop, the Syrian bishop, I think.
Yeah, in Western Sydney.
What's his name? Mari. He's saying let the video be shown.
Yeah, exactly. He's the one that got stabbed, and he's like, let it be shown.
and so basically, what we've got is the federal government saying. We can't show actual live footage of an assault, but we can cover up Muslim extremism or Islamic extremism.
Yeah,
which is worse.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the Muslims I've met are wonderful people, just like the Christians, just like the Sikhs, just like the Hindu, just like most humans. But there's some Islamic extremists that are vile. Yeah. They're inhuman, and we shouldn't be suppressing that. We should be making sure that people can get access to it to realize it's real.
Of course. And there's extremists in all all religions, creeds, cults, and they need to be exposed the same way as anyone else. But there's obviously a political part of that as well going on in Australia. Just quickly on the I don't want to touch on the vax stuff that happened during the whole COVID farce. But the vax mandates, will anything come to those who force the companies and the government and people who force those onto the people who now have obviously health issues and whatnot? Do you think is anyone going to be held liable for that, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think they will be. If you look at what happened in that, it was the uni party working. The states had power with the health, okay? But Morrison has power with the regulations. The states had power with health, the regulatory issues. Most of them, federal government has got some that they've stolen, but the federal government has the money. So you've got a complete mismatch here, and this is what it did. Morrison ran that whole shit show. There's no doubt in my mind that he ran that along with his comrade in arms, Greg Hunt. Mm-hmm. Greg Hunt put in place the safeguard mechanism, which is a basis for a climate carbon dioxide tax. Remember how Abbott got rid of the tax that Gillard put in? Yeah. So Gillard put in a carbon dioxide tax when she broke a lie, when she made a lie and broke a promise. Abbott came and removed it. What people don't know is that the Liberal Prime Minister after Abbott, who knifed Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull, put in place another basis for a carbon dioxide tax. And Greg Hunt was his man in charge of climate and climate and the environment, who put it in. And they whistled it through the Senate in the last week of sitting in 2015. Yeah. Hardly anyone reported it. Yeah. But that's what it was. It was a global carbon dioxide tax, a framework mechanism for safeguard tax. Labor came in 2022 and ramped it up. Mm-hmm. So there were two people, I believe, who should be held most accountable. One is Morrison and the other is Greg Hunt. Mm-hmm. Now, Greg Hunt was in charge of manager of strategy for the World Economic Forum in 2020 and 2021. This was a global operation. Morrison said, we have no vaccine mandates in this country. He said that every night for about 2 weeks. The lying bastard, because what he didn't say was that he bought the injections. He gave them to the states.
And bought an over amount, right?
He bought 11 each for the whole population, kids and everyone, right? So why was he spending that money? That was the largest transfer of wealth in our country's history, from your pocket, taxpayers' pocket, their pockets, into Big Pharma. That's all it was. Yep. For something that had never been tested properly. Minimal testing, and that failed. Now we know that we'll get into that. So he bought the injections, massive overreach. He gave the injections to the states. He indemnified the states. He gave them access to the Federal Health Department records, which is the only way they can enforce the mandates. Mm-hmm. And then the states, on top of that, the premiers and some of the chief health officers at the state level, they said that they did it because the National Cabinet said to. Yeah. The National Cabinet is a bullshit entity, does not comply with the Constitution. It was hastily formed by Morrison. Who was in charge of the National Cabinet? Morrison. Mm-hmm. Who was leading it? Who drove that vaccine mandate? Mm-hmm. Morrison. And then what the states did was that they forced companies to do it. Yep. And so we had enormous overreach, and at the same time they took away ivermectin because that was a proven, safe, effective drug for treating the virus. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly safe. 4 billion doses. So what we've seen is massive collusion between the federal and state governments. Why did they collude? Because there was a shitload of money, billions of dollars, Andrew, coming their way for the lockdowns and the other things. Mm. Morrison bribed the state premiers who were so inhuman in their approach, especially Andrews and Palaszczuk and McGowan in Western Australia. Yeah. I mean, what they did to people. We also saw, for the first time in human history, the young being sacrificed to protect the elderly. Any animal, the elderly look after the young to promulgate the promulgation of their species. Here we saw the reverse. We saw the We saw the poor and the vulnerable and the youth being
amazing.
Sacrificed for the elderly.
First time in human history, right?
And then we saw something incredibly inhumane. If you're a 2-year-old, you've got life expectancy in Australia is 83 years, so roughly. So if you're a 2-year-old, you've got 81 life years ahead of you. If you're an 83-year-old, you've got 0 life years ahead of you. How they can put people in an aged care facility, deny them the opportunity in their last months, last years of seeing their grandkids, and that would be of greater health to them than a homicidal an injection that will kill them potentially, is just beyond me. But it was all done for Big Pharma to get money.
Yeah, we saw it. My grandmother, she was in a home with my parents in New South Wales, and they had the COVID window, glass window they could visit them in, and you're just like, what are we doing? Like, and then
you'd want to smash that window.
Well, yeah, she passed away not long after that, and it's just kind of very inhumane. We sacrifice our kids' education. We see a lot of kids that were starting school or in the middle of their school journey that are really struggling now today, a couple of years later. And I voiced this from the start.
That's globally.
And I got killed for it. I'm just like, we can't be shutting schools. We can't be. These kids need to be out. They need to be out in parks. They need, they poured sand in skate parks and they block basketball hoops. I'm just like, what are we doing? These kids. Man, I was okay, well off, bigger house, pool. So our kids weren't in school at that point. But you're thinking to someone who's living in a city, both parents working, struggling to pay the bills, 2-bedroom unit with 2 kids, work from home with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Good luck. Like, your mental health within a week of that, within 2 days of 2 young kids and trying to manage work and your boss calling you, that's 10 out of 10 stress, 24 hours a day. And I totally agree. Just sacrificing kids for the elderly. My grandma told me, she goes, I don't want to be protected for my grandkids to be sacrificed to not be able to go outside.
She wants the grandkids.
Yeah, but not just that. She's just like, if I pass away, so be it. I want my kids to be free and go out in the world, not be locked down. And that's the right mentality. But she obviously fled communism and had saw this playbook, which gave her PTSD, mind you, once she was still alive. And she's like holy shit, I escaped this kind of lockdown, border checkpoints and all this shit. She was like, well, where am I living? Crazy.
I spoke strongly against the carbon dioxide tax, Gillard's carbon dioxide tax and the climate fraud. And I spoke from Perth to Cairns to Melbourne to Sydney, Brisbane, various other places. Always, Andrew, the first people who come up to me when I finish speaking and say thank you,
people that fled
had Eastern European accents.
100%.
And they'd say, we have seen this before. And Václav Klaus, the president of the Czech Republic, in Czechoslovakia, where in other countries they would have 50% believe the climate fraud and 50% disbelieve it. In Czechoslovakia, 10% believed it because he, as the leader of the country, said it was bullshit.
Yeah.
And he said that, and I met him in New York and I met him in Brisbane, he said that someone who's grown up in totalitarianism, he could see what this was about.
You sniff it out pretty quickly.
It was about control.
100%. And look, is there a premise of it that probably was starting out to be for the good? And are there people involved in that movement that were doing it for the right reasons? For sure. A minority of them. But once you go to big corp and all these tentacles that are making money out of it, you can sniff it out.
In climate, I'll argue with you. There may have been some people convinced by the propaganda of COVID, and there may have been some people convinced by the propaganda with climate. But the climate fraud was started by one man, Maurice Strong. He was at the senior levels of the United Nations, and he said he had 2 objectives in life. One was to deindustrialize Western civilization. Can you imagine that? Get rid of all of this.
Yeah.
And the other one was to put in place an unelected socialist global governance. And repeatedly, people in charge of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and other bodies have said this is all about a new world order. It is all about economic transformation to socialism. That's what it is.
Yeah. 100%, and the policies in itself show that, in my opinion. But
COVID was a disgrace. So you asked me a question about will they be held accountable? Andrew, they're so ingrained in protecting their asses.
Exactly.
I think that some of the agencies probably did it through ignorance. Some of them did it willfully. We see that Professor John Skerritt, who was head of the TGA, that gave them provisional approval of the injections. Mm-hmm. No testing.
Yeah.
He went 8 months after he left his job as the head of that regulator, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, he went and he became
Big Pharma somewhere.
a board member of Medicines Australia, which is the pharmaceutical lobby group in this country. Now, Professor Skerritt, I asked him a question about testing he'd done in provisionally approving these injections, which are basically untested. He admitted to me in Senate estimates, see, this is where it can be useful, there's Senate estimates that they did no testing in Australia. They relied upon the FDA in America, the Food and Drug Administration in America. We already knew, because before that time, the FDA had said they did no testing themselves. They relied upon
someone else's testing.
Pfizer.
Yeah.
And Pfizer, we know, stopped its tests early because they were killing thousands of people. So we have got Professor Skerritt's Therapeutic Goods Administration in this country approving on a provisional basis these killing drugs without doing testing and relying upon Pfizer and knowing so. When it came to the virus, we said, our party said, we will support the government because we saw pictures of these videos from Italy, China, of people collapsing in the streets, dying in their thousands, buried in their thousands, all the rest of it. We thought, geez, if this is real, it's going to be serious. So you've got to err on the side of caution.
100%, yeah.
So we said, go for it, government. Here, you have an open check, go for it. But we want your data. Yep. We want your plan, and we will hold you accountable. So I think it was, we approved that spending in March. And then in May, I wrote a letter to Palaszczuk. I think it was May, it might have been June. Wrote a letter to Palaszczuk, my state premier, and Morrison, my prime minister, my country's prime minister, and said, where's your evidence? We got back crap.
Yeah.
So a few months later, I think it was August, I wrote the same pair, another letter, got back complete crap. Basically saying the evidence is here and it wasn't there. So you go then to March 2021, and I asked the chief medical officer, I said, I want, in Senate estimates, I want the evidence, the categorization of the strength, the severity of the virus, COVID virus, and the transmissibility. And he did a good job. He sent it back to me, and I said, I want numbered terms, and I also want relative to past flus. He gave me back a graph which showed severity up here and transmissibility along here.
Yep.
Transmissibility was about the same as some past flus.
Yep.
Less than the Spanish flu. Severity, wait for this one, the severity, Andrew, was low to moderate.
Yep.
Now, if you then use your brain, as you do, and you say, well, some people with comorbidities, the obese, the elderly, some elderly, not all elderly, they're high risk. It can be severe, it can be fatal. If you take them out of the equation, that means for most people in the population, most people,
low to moderate.
It's low. No, it's low to moderate overall. Yeah. It's very low.
Yeah.
Children rarely die from it. Mm-hmm. Young adults rarely die from it. Middle-aged people rarely die from it. Yep. It's a threat to some old people. So we turned the country upside down. We destroyed kids' lives for nothing. Something that was not as severe as some past flus. And so it was about wealth transfer and control, which is the same about climate. But you look at the inhuman consequences. You're familiar with Maria Montessori?
Somewhat.
Kids go through planes of development. I won't go through it all, but when a mother is breastfeeding, it's at the perfect the eye contact is perfect height, perfect distance for kids' focal length, infants' focal length. And then kids start learning how to read faces. And that is extremely important for their social development and their own mental development. Mm-hmm. And with a mask on, you can't read a person's face.
Yeah.
And then you can't have social interaction.
Or even just childcare. Like, you take a kid's toy, kid cries, I can't tell. It's just simple stuff like that because they've both got masks on. That interaction of like, oh, he's crying, I've done something wrong, I need to fix it. Yep. It's all gone out the window.
So kids in there, and we know that the critical years for the formation of both character and intellect are birth to 6.
Yep.
Maria Montessori, most astute and comprehensive observer and detailed observer of children's development and human development ever. She said that. The Nazis confirmed that. Hitler said, give me the boy, I'll give you the man. Yep. The Jesuits confirmed it. So at the critical years for the formation of both character and intellect, birth to 6, we wiped out kids and forced them to wear masks, took them away from other kids, took them away from other interactions, destroyed their lives, destroyed their kids at school, missed out on 2 years of schooling.
Yeah, and put them in front of a screen, which is already a separate epidemic in itself, really. Not much long left. All right.
That's fine. I'm enjoying it.
Yes, something else I want to touch on is just I guess your position and your party's position on youth crime, which is a big issue right now in Australia, especially here on the Gold Coast, Queensland especially. And then just factor that in. Just want to prerequisite that with. Did you happen to see the detention centre being built up here in Woodford?
Detention centre?
The detention centre
No.
of the Queensland government. You didn't catch eye of that?
No.
One for you to do an estimates on. A major new youth detention centre will be ready by the end of 2026. Government confirming the project will cost $627.6 million. That is equivalent of each of the 80 cells costing $7.8 million. You read that right? $7.8 million for 80 cells. 80 bed.
That's just to build it, not to run it.
Yeah, that's just to get it up, get the structure up, and the 80 bed facility made up of smaller, more home-like accommodation, because we want people that are breaking the law to have a home-like accommodation. Units is set to be built next to the adult correctional facility at Woodford, with early works beginning on Tuesday. This was an article from a little while ago, but we'll get into the youth crime thing in a second. But touching on that, then you go to Victoria with the Com Games. You go to now $3 billion of debt wiped for students in Australia. How do we just continue to light money on fire? But how does a cell cost $7.8 million? Like, so this room right here,
it's a nice room.
$7.8 million. Like, is it the door? Is it the door? That's like, I don't understand how the hell.
Go and pay the doorknobs.
Yeah. But Senator, how is this? As a regular punter, you're looking at it like, what is going on here? Like, I don't know, unions are heavily involved. There's a huge union tax part of this whole build, and that's what I've read. But I'm just struggling with that. Like I said, Com Games in Victoria is notorious for starting projects, paying half the bill, and then cancelling the East-West link. Com Games have burnt $500 million, just gone to bureaucrats and whatnot to not even run the bloody thing. How is this okay? And how do we hold these politicians and these people accountable for just lighting our money on fire? I mean,
Well, the key to a successful democracy, Andrew, is active engagement with the people. Sorry, the people's active engagement. They should be writing to their local MPs, not emails. Emails just don't work because they get flooded.
It has to be a formal letter, right?
It doesn't have to be, but it's better if it is a formal letter. And when you say formal, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be typed. It can be handwritten, just neat handwriting, and signed. They take more notice of paper letters. Telephone them. Tell them what you think. They pay our wages. The people pay our wages. Mm-hmm. So we represent them. We're supposed to be working for the people, servants to the people.
Yep.
I used to say in the Senate, from my first speech onward, I just said I'd start the speech with, as a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia. When I first said that, some of the Labor senators snickered, and some of the Liberals also showed signs that they thought it was crazy. So they serve us. The other thing is, go and visit them. Go and tell your state member of parliament. And even if it's the opposition party, just tell them to push it through. Because and threaten them with changing your vote. Threaten them with voting for a minor party. Threaten them with just saying, you are supposed to represent me in the first place. Mm-hmm. Just make the consequences known. There's one thing that many politicians don't hear, and that's the people, but there's one thing they do hear, and when someone threatens to change their vote.
Yeah.
So embarrass the hell out of them. So that's how, it's just a symptomatic of general lack of accountability. But the other thing, Andrew, is in Queensland, you heard of the Red Union?
No.
The Red Union consists of a new nurses union and a new teachers union. It was started by a group of people who're sick and tired of industrial relations in this country. And what's happened is the big unions, the Queensland Teachers Union, the national equivalent as well, the CFMEU, many of the big unions have become big businesses.
Yeah.
And I can tell you some horror stories that we found where where union bosses have signed deals with major multinational companies to pay people less than the award rate. Now, you cannot do that. Mm-hmm. But they've signed agreements and they've signed off on these things. They've authorized them. So the big unions many of the big unions are no longer looking after the workers. So the Queensland the Nurses Professional Association of Queensland, the nurses and the equivalent of teachers, they're nicknamed the Red Union. They were formed before COVID, and they were growing in numbers because they were providing a service at half the cost.
Yeah.
And they're actually representing the workers. During COVID, teachers and nurses went to the mainstream unions, and the mainstream union said, just go and get the mandate. Just go and get the vaccine. Mm-hmm. And they just completely abandoned the workers. And that happened to most unions. Now, with the Red Union, they started launching legal cases and holding the government accountable. So what I'm saying is that the Red Union, which is a new startup union, grew dramatically in numbers because they're providing a service and protecting their workers. The Palaszczuk government introduced legislation to stop the Red Union's existence.
Oh, wow.
Because what's happened is that the big unions pay their money, their dues to the Labor Party for their campaigns. That keeps the election campaigns, that keeps the Labor Party in office, and that keeps them handing out contracts to the big unions.
And votes. Heavy, yeah.
Well, that's right. But I mean, they make sure that when the state government purchases things, mm-hmm. that it goes to unionized workers.
Yeah.
Now, unionized workers, workers that are covered by unions are now down to 10% in the private sector. Outside of the public service, they're down to about under 10%. So what workers are really saying is, we don't need you because you're costing us too much money. Yep. You're donating your money to the Labor Party, and you don't give us service. And sometimes you're undermining us. Many of the deals right across the various industries in this country where the workers have been shafted have been developed by the large union bosses. So what I'm saying is that, first of all, the people turning a blind eye on the bureaucrats and the public service, and the politicians have led to increases in cost because they can get away with it. Second thing is that they're protecting some of the unions, and sometimes the members of parliament and the bureaucrats are looking after their own mates. They've got cozy deals going on. I tried to get an inquiry into the Local Government Association of Queensland, which sounds like a state government body, but it's a private corporation.
Local Government Association of Queensland.
Yeah.
What's their charter? What are they doing?
They basically, it's enshrined in legislation in this state that they do not have to give a tender to get a contract. They're making all kinds of money and controlling all kinds of things in the local councils. I went and I found I was given evidence of significant corruption in the use of federal government funds for disaster recovery, given to some local councils, not all local councils. Most local councils are fine, but some. Now I got a deal with the federal government under Morrison to have an inquiry into it, and that inquiry, we agreed we'd support the Morrison government on something, and they would get the inquiry up for us, and we would be chair of it. Just to protect taxpayer funds, billions of dollars rorted, we believe. So at the last minute, a National Party senator from Queensland, Matt Canavan, mm-hmm. and a Liberal senator from Queensland, James McGrath, they threatened the government with crossing the floor if they went ahead and agreed to us having that inquiry. So this was about transparency. And the government just said, we can't afford the embarrassment. We'll have to renege on a deal for the inquiry.
Wow.
So you've got all kinds of shady stuff going on in this state, and it's protected by state and federal members of parliament. Mm. So that's why we need more openness. The Triple C, the Crime and Corruption Commission, we don't believe operates properly. So we know of instances where there have been major perversions of justice. We had a councillor who was on the Fraser Coast Council. He then became mayor. His name was Chris Loft, a really decent man, probably a bit naive, but he was up against the corruption in the Fraser Coast area. And as mayor, when he became mayor, he started cleaning out. Mm. And the federal and the state government passed legislation that basically sent him to jail. That's what's going on in this state.
Mm.
An honest man gets crucified, flung in jail for 6 months because he's doing his job as mayor.
Mm.
So it's a combination. But it boils down to the people are not holding their members of parliament accountable, state and federal.
Well, yeah, I mean, it shows when you got 7.8 million per 80 jail cells. It's just it's outrageous. You look at the build of a local townhouse. You can do a small townhouse. You can usually do for $400,000-500,000 for the shell. And you're looking at a little jail cell, and you're just like scratching your head. And most people look at it like, what the hell are they doing with their money? But that leads on to youth crime. I mean, what's your position on everything going on with youth crime? I mean, it's getting up there here in Queensland, becoming a real issue. It's an issue in pockets of Melbourne, in affluent suburbs where, all the nefarious people, gangs, bikies, whatever you want to call it, are just now employing, I use that word loosely, youth to commit a lot of these crimes because they know that within a week or two they're going to be out on the street on bail. Youth detention doesn't do anything for them. They come back out. Yeah. But how do you fix this problem? I know Townsville's had a huge issue up there.
Oh, huge.
Massive issue up there. Gold Coast is big. I mean, the amount of home evasions here to steal high-end cars is just outrageous. And they generally some of them don't even take the cars to strip them for parts. They just do them for a joyride, go commit crimes in a nice Range Rover, and then just dump it somewhere because they're tracked anyway, most of these cars. But the issue is you had the lady up in husband and wife with the kids up in Brisbane about a year ago that got stabbed to death, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ended up passing away. I guess the perpetrator was known, was a violent offender, was out on bail. How do we fix that? I mean, even factoring that into kind of what the government's passed now with that $5,000 domestic violence levy for affected individuals that want to move on premise, it works well, and I think it's going to be heavily rorted, that $5,000. But you look at all that, and men should be held accountable and all that. I look at men and women who are magistrates and judges need to be held accountable.
Yep,
that's what it's coming down to. It's not men should be held accountable. There's female judges that are implementing these lenient sentences, but how do we fix or stop youth crime right now?
First, we have to understand the problem. There's no doubt youth crime is a problem, but also crime's a problem, not just youth.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, let's just factor in crime. Yeah.
So let's go to Hervey Bay, a lovely town. It's not a tiny town. It's a fairly large town. I've forgotten the population. I'm guessing 50,000, maybe 30, 50, something like that. So lovely town, good people. We have a crime forum up there because 3 women were killed in a car, allegedly by a 13-year-old who hijacked another car.
Crashed into them.
Yeah. So one was a nurse, the other in one car. Another one was, and the other 2 were in another car. The 13-year-old was driving a car at high speed, smashed into a car in front of him, and knocked that car into the oncoming vehicles. That's where she died and the other 2 died. So 3 lives lost. So we went up there because the town was seething. And we gave the opportunity to the family of the dead woman to speak. Her sister spoke. Her mother spoke, who's elderly, and the brother wanted to just cool his heels. Well, I'll always remember this, Andrew. I was closer than you are to Lisa, the dead woman's sister, and she expressed her grief, and then she just sort of, she was about to unload on the 13-year-old, and I was just right next to her. And I could see her body just relax. And then she said, in many ways, that 13-year-old is a victim. He's a victim of society.
Mm-hmm.
Our society is so screwed up. When you're told that the world is going to end in 5 years, and you've heard that all your life, from before you could understand English, where's the meaning and the purpose come?
Yeah.
When you've got a school system that's talking about cutting bits and pieces off your body, and that you're really a girl, or if you're a boy, you're really a girl.
Cat.
Yeah. What does that do? When your families are hurting from house prices, cost of living prices, tripling in energy prices, and they're probably doing crime as well. when you have families in Ipswich, hell, Cairns, Townsville, Bundaberg, Maryborough, Gladstone, Rockhampton, Boona, Logan, Ipswich, Beenleigh, living in tents, cars, caravans, living under bridges, when you've got councils moving them on because they're supposed to. And some councils are showing some tolerance towards this, but they're moving them on. Where's your safety come from? When you've got people, rangers coming from councils and showing that we're talking about hardworking families going home to a car with a couple of kids, and the kids get home to the car before the parents come there. And the rangers take the kids, and the parents lose custody because there's no one home.
Yeah.
Where's the meaning? Where's the purpose? When you realise that the federal government is bringing in 750,000 migrants in the last 12 months, when we've got 2.3 million people on non-resident visas in the country, we've got 400,000 tourists. That's 2.7 million people, 10% of the population of Australia looking for a bed.
Yep. With a real estate crisis at the moment too. Yeah.
Well, that's what's driving the real estate crisis.
Of course.
And then you say, why is the government allowing so many migrants to come into the country? They're begging them to come in because they want to make sure there's no recession. See, at the moment, we've been in at least 3 quarters of negative growth per capita. But when you flood the joint with people, you increase the gross domestic product, so it hides the recession, just barely. What Albanese and before him Morrison were trying to do was to avoid being branded as the government that caused the recession. So what they're trying to do is hide the recession by raising the gross domestic product artificially by bringing in migrants. We just can't afford it. So what we've got is so many factors driving crime in this state. We've got Dan Andrews, people from Victoria, fleeing Victoria, coming up here to live. And so we've got magistrates, lenient sentences, because that's the way the law is written.
Yeah.
So we've got some magistrates going beyond that and making it very lenient. But what we want to do as One Nation is have a review panel comprised of judges and lawyers to look at the sentencing to assess the sentencing of criminals. But you've also got to put the responsibility back where it belongs, Andrew, because if someone commits a crime, they should be held accountable. And so the parents should have to pay for the damages of that young child that's gone off the rails.
Yeah.
Make the accountability there. Or some kind of service back. If they can't afford to pay, then some kind of service back.
Community service, yeah.
Not just the perpetrator, the criminal, confront his victims and be shamed, but also to understand that they'll have to pay for it.
Yep.
You've also got to get better school system so that people, most boys, 14, 15, adolescents, are not much good in class. They're
Sitting still. Yeah.
Well, it's not only not just sitting still. Boys like to think with their hands.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. They need to be doing things.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. Like I see it in my 7-year-old's like that. He's, I'm always grabbing.
And the trades, tradies are worth their weight in gold. But we've been telling people, oh no, tradies no good. You got to go to university. Well, that's bullshit. I've been to 2 of the best universities in the world, one of the top 3 universities in the world. And I told my kids, as did my wife, she's similarly been to a top school, top universities, do not go to university unless you need a piece of paper, like a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Go out and start working. Get a trade if you need it. Mm-hmm. That's where to go. So we're putting boys into a schooling system that is now gender-bending kids, confusing kids, telling them the world's going to end in 5 years. Where's the meaning? Where's the purpose? And when it comes to rehabilitation, we know that kids go into rehab. There's no rehab in our jail system, detention system. Kids go into detention centres and they come out hardened criminals.
Yeah, they come through the network too.
Yeah. So, and when you've got people in Hervey Bay, they were telling me there's some of the people at the forum. We had 400 people at the forum. They're telling us that kids hijack cars on the Saturday or Sunday. On the Monday, they're driving past the police station like this to the cop. They have no respect whatsoever because there's nothing in the way of being held accountable. And then you've got Palaszczuk as the premier saying 12 months or so ago, Stephen Miles, the deputy premier, there's no solution to youth crime.
Yeah.
Well, that's complete bullshit. But what they're afraid of doing is realizing, first of all, their policies have caused this. Yeah. The second thing is they're afraid to put really serious issues in place.
Yeah.
And they don't have the understanding, Andrew, of the comprehensiveness of which of the cause, so you can't understand the comprehensiveness of the solution. But it's harsher penalty some case. But then you see Stephen Miles will fly up to Cairns and say, we're going to give you a helicopter, or maybe it was Townsville, we're going to give you an extra police helicopter. Well, all that's going to do is catch the kids quicker, release them quicker, and feed them into the same corrupt system.
Same point. Yeah.
What you've got to do is understand the basics of what's causing this, and it's a lack of meaning and purpose, especially for young males. We've had so many examples, Atherton Tableland, further north on the Tableland, Maryborough, Rockhampton. We've had formal systems that have set up and rehabilitated kids with a 90% success rate. The kids don't offend again. And the Palaszczuk Miles government has withdrawn the funding from them. One of the setups was Muay Thai. Is that how you pronounce it? Muay Thai, the martial art?
Yep. Muay Thai.
Muay Thai, sorry.
Yep.
Muay Thai's the drink.
Yep.
Muay Thai. Torrin O'Brien in Rockhampton was offered to do this, to take kids into Muay Thai, and he was going really well. And then the state government, when he became a One Nation candidate, the state government withdrew his funding. The Maryborough, the Hard Yakka camp, phenomenal results of boot camp. Just gives kids some meaning, some purpose.
They need community. I mean, a lot of kids that grow up in generally single-parent households or both parents aren't around much, even domestic violence homes or whatever it is, they need a sense of community and being. And if they don't have meaning, I totally agree with that. I totally agree with the fact that these kids end up in nefarious gangs, people, activities because they don't have a sense of belonging. They've been shunned by society. All it takes is a martial art or a sport or just a local community club where they actually have something to get to hold each other accountable, because you got to make. It's kind of like the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous philosophy. They usually give you, when you go into those programs or drug rehabilitation, they give you a buddy. So once you're out, you've always got someone to try to hold you accountable, call you, are you right, you're using, are you drinking? And it's the same kind of thing within a community. Is like you got your mates to hold you accountable. Hey man, don't get back in that life. Don't do that. And it makes total sense. And it's a shame to hear that you're saying it's political, that they've wiped some of these programs because the wrong political party was affiliated with it.
But the root cause is that kids have been left abandoned. They haven't got that sense of belonging, haven't got that sense of meaning and purpose. Why hang around here anyway? It's only 5 years before the planet ends.
Exactly.
And the cost of everything's going up. Energy costs, everything's going up. So
parents are stressed. They probably don't see their parents enough. Divorce, they go through all that shit. I mean, the divorce rate during COVID spiked even further than normal averages. But it does come in to say then, chicken before the egg before the chicken, whatever it is. But with the sentencing is horrid. And I grew up in a lower socioeconomic suburb out in the southeast suburbs of Melbourne, and I would say I had every excuse to. I caught buses with people shooting up heroin on them. They had to install the strobe lights on my bus route because people were put needles in their arms while I'm on the bus with them. You're just like, holy shit. Drug dealers, gangs. I had instances where I could have joined gangs, all that kind of stuff. It still does come down to, if you do the crime, I'm not a fan of magistrates, judges saying, let's look at that person's history. Yes, it plays a factor. I think it plays more of a factor the rehabilitation. The penalty should be the penalty. I'm a firm believer in. I had a kind of tough upbringing at times. It didn't make me then say I want to go and carjack somebody, right? And I think that's where we're confused. And the bleeding heart magistrates are like, oh, well, they, drug affected parents, tough upbringing, we'll give them another chance. And it's like chance number 8, and we're still giving them another chance.
That only rewards the kids.
Exactly. And you need a firm hand. That leads me into.
So we have got to have severe consequences, but part of those consequences can be work for or to pay money to the victim, or the parents can pay the money to the
Work
victim.
it back, yeah, 100%. Yeah, but you're still going to be punished severely, and it's going to put you out where you're going to have to, maybe you have to mandatory join some of these community groups and spend a certain amount of time with them once you're out of detention center. But it's the policies are just.
If you do the crime, you do the time.
100% agree. And moving on to that, I don't know if you just look this up. I think is it Nick Demetto, Castle Law? You see that was just tabled.
If you shoot someone in your own house?
Basically, well, you can't shoot in Australia because you can't really own a gun, but it's hard to own a gun. But with lawyer weapons licensing, you definitely can't shoot them, but you can use basically proposed amendments to Section 267 of the Criminal Code, remove the factor that an occupant must reasonably believe an intruder is trying to commit an indictable offence in order to lawfully use force, remove the factor that an occupant can only use legal force if it is necessary to use force, allow an occupant to lawfully use force against another person in their house in order to prevent that person from unlawfully entering the dwelling and unlawfully remaining in the dwelling, add the definition of premises to include a building, a room, land, garage, building, caravan, vehicle on the property, add conditions that grievous bodily harm and murder in self-defense is only allowed if the intruder attempts to enter the dwelling in the night or threatens actual violence or pretends to be armed with a weapon or is in company of one or more persons or damages, threatens or attempts to damage property or the occupant. So basically, yeah, you can protect your own property. There's still some tricky stuff. I'm a firm believer in someone breaks into my house or no holds barred.
As a dad, what's your main duty?
Pretty much, that's exactly what I'm saying. There's people that have said, so these amendments were saying that if it's only one person, doesn't matter, it needs to be more than one person. Oh, do you think they were there to rob you? I don't have a survey at my bloody door for a criminal to say, can you tick what box are you here for? Are you here to rape my wife? Are you here to nab one of my kids? Are you here to steal stuff? Are you high on ice? Tick the boxes, and then I act appropriately. Like, what world are these politicians and bureaucrats living in? I think I'm a believer of. I grew up in Australia where everything was not anti-violence, but anti-protecting yourself and don't retaliate, and very anti-gun in Australia. It's like where I grew up. Then I went to America and I was like, oh, you guys with your guns. But then the more I kind of looked at things, I was like, I'm now a believer that you should be allowed to be armed in your own home. That's my position. I believe that should be a human right, especially when the government and the system is not protecting you. And that's where we get into in Australia, where I think you should be able to protect your home at all costs. I'm not, the fact that a criminal has rights breaking into your home while your children and wife are asleep, I cannot comprehend that.
No.
And I think this law, I think it's Nick Demetto, is it,
Yep.
Trent? That's the bill, but Nick Demetto. So he's a Queensland
Cat Australia Party.
Yep. Yeah. So
State Parliament.
Yeah, state parliament. So
Member for Hinchinbrook, I think.
he is. I mean, that's exactly right. But yeah, I mean, I think it's. I hope it passes. I hope it goes through because I think, I don't know how you do it in Australia because you can't, per the Licensing Act, you can't use a weapon to defend yourself. But I think being able to protect yourself and I'm not thinking twice. Like if I'm harmed along the way, so be it. But I'm not thinking twice, and I'm not using lenient force because I don't know if they have a knife or if someone else is in the house. I think I'm not sitting here saying I'm Rambo or something, but someone comes in your house at 1 a.m. and you're startled. I'm not thinking twice, and to then have to factor in that I don't want to hurt this guy too much because then I might go to court for the next two years to fight for not going to jail, and then I get stabbed. Like it's just it doesn't make sense to me. So I just want to get your party's position, your position on something like the Castle Law. Are you for it? Do you think people should be able to protect their home with excessive force if needed?
Well, I agree with you entirely. That's why I asked the question: what's your number one responsibility?
Mm-hmm.
To protect your children, protect your wife, protect your property.
Yep.
Government has three roles: protect life, protect property, and protect freedom. And the governments, state and federal, have shown that they're not capable of doing either.
Exactly right.
For the last for decades actually, but especially for the last 4 years, they've stolen freedoms, they've killed people. Their policies on COVID have been homicidal. That they are guilty of homicide, in my opinion. They've stolen your property to comply. In America, where did you live in America?
I was everywhere. Midwest. I was West Coast. I was Texas. So I kind of saw the San Francisco. I saw the dynamic of many different subcultures within that culture.
Well, there's something very strong about America, and that's got 50 states, so it has enormous differences in power and social standards between the different states. They're enormous. But when you've got so many to sample from, you've got a very good statistical validity for what I'm about to say. In America, wherever there are strict gun laws,
I know exactly where you're going.
there are
More
high
shootings.
gun crimes.
California, Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago.
Yeah.
I lived in Chicago for 2 years. Wherever there are no or very lax gun laws, there are minimal gun crimes. So we should be able to protect ourselves anywhere. Because if I'm walking down the street, do I run home before someone assaults me?
Yeah.
That I can have the protection of my house and then I'm okay to defend myself? No, it should be anywhere. The right to protect yourself and your family and your property should be paramount. If you go and use excess force, if you kill someone when you could have just disabled them, then you have to wear the consequences. But I won't comment on Nick Demetto's law proposal in detail because I don't know the details of it. But I will say the principle, I agree.
Yeah, 100%. And I cite the same statistics. I mean, it's Texas. I think parts of Texas, or maybe even the whole state, is an open carry, I believe. And you rarely ever see mass shootings down there because it's that think twice mentality of, does someone else have a gun in this place if I'm going to try to shoot up, But it's always interesting when you hear the gun lobbyist stuff, and coming from Australia, we were just ingrained to be anti-gun. And I'm like, responsible firearm ownership's key, and safety, and learning how to use these things if you're going to own them. And I think the US now is starting to do that in more states. But yeah, you go to the statistics and the data doesn't lie. Where it's really hard to obtain a firearm legally is generally the places that have the higher shooting crimes from criminals, where places where you can legally own, it's definitely tapered down. Now, is there the instance of someone who legally owns a firearm and the kid steals it, shoots up a school? That's the unfortunate reality that they're dealing with, right? How to handle all that. But
then they've got to be locked.
Exactly right. That's the responsibility of the person who's own firearms in Australia and licensed and whatnot. And I like to go and shoot at my local club every now and then. And the responsibility is on me, and there's protocol within, Australia is very hard. It's not very hard to acquire. It's just a long process to go through all the box ticking and bullshit legislation that, by the way, makes no sense whatsoever. So
You're right.
How's this one? When you acquire a firearm, at least in Queensland, you can go and get I'd never fired a proper shotgun before. So I go get my weapons permit. You can't get a pistol straight away because that's the hard one to get. You got to go through a whole longer process for a pistol. I get my permit for my firearm. Yep, come to the club. What gun do you want? All right, permit to acquire. That comes in another 6 months. You get your firearm. I go pick it up. I get this shotgun. Never shot it before in my life. Never. It's a model that I've never handled before. Here you go, mate. There's your rounds. That's it. And I'm like, so I took it myself to go back to the club that I'm with and have someone walk me through, like just for safety reasons, like making sure how it all works and this and that, and watch this when you're shooting it. There's nothing in the legislation for that. They just literally let me walk out with a shotgun because I was licensed.
Yep.
And I have my safe ready. I have all the boxes ticked, but there's no protocol in a safety course with the firearm I'm acquiring. Just like, but I've shot a pistol to get my license, but now I've been given it just
shotgun. Yep.
Makes no sense. But it's all just BS box ticking. But it's still not. You still have to take the onus to make yourself be competent with that weapon and be safe and go through the protocol. But if I was just an average banana that was just like, I just want a gun, I got it, and I just took it home, and then I'm playing.
But if you've been shooting pistols though, then they know you're pretty responsible because that's pretty difficult to get pistol license.
No, but part of your license permit in weapons license for Queensland is you got to go to a gun club and do, like, I think it's a safety shoot with an instructor with a pistol, but it still doesn't change the fact that this shotgun that I got, I've never shot before. I've never felt that one before. I've never felt the weight of that one. I don't, the mechanisms, I mean, they're all pretty basic, don't get me wrong, but to someone who's never done it before, just got to walk out with it. So just an interesting one that I always found funny with weapons licensing stuff.
You're illustrating the key point, Andrew. And you raised the key word, I think, in gun ownership is responsible or responsibility. What I've found is that most gun owners, everyone that I've met who's a gun owner in this country, is a very responsible citizen,
Mm.
very responsible. And the laws are such that only responsible people can get them lawfully. That doesn't stop criminals getting them.
Yeah.
They're out of the system. But the other thing is that the people who are not responsible in this country are the lawmakers, the politicians, the people who are charged with the ultimate responsibility of citizens' protection. While ever they keep lying, while ever they keep dodging accountability, while ever they keep running away and hiding things, there will never be stability and safety in this country. Never. Because you've probably heard the saying, when a company is rotten, the rot starts at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the fish rot starts from the head.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same with the government. If you've got public servants who come into the public service wanting to do a decent job and they're corrupted by the bureaucracy because the bureaucracy's role is to protect the minister from the truth and to hide the truth, what's the public servant going to do? They bugger it, it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
Why would you fight the system? And next thing you know, you're corrupted and you're in the system and you're swimming along with the rest of them. The real people who have to be held accountable are the people at the very top of the system. And for the government, that's the premier, that's the prime minister at federal level, that's the ministers, that's every member of parliament. But Andrew, the top of the tree is the citizen. And until the citizens start doing their job.
But how do you do your job? This is the thing. If you're an everyday mum and dad that's working 12 hours a day, childcare or school, kids sport, and you're stuck in that rat race, how do you find the time to even research this stuff? Like a lot of friends I talk to that are in the labor force, I like to pick brains of some friends of mine that are working 50 odd hours a week. Because I like to get and one of my friends owns a cafe. Another friend of mine owns a cafe in an industrial area, and that's like the biggest pub test.
That's where you get the best.
Oh, it's the best because I ask him about things like this, and some of the stuff he's like, "What the hell? I never even heard of that." But my point is, how does a regular citizen find the time to do this between everything they're doing on a daily basis?
I'd say two things. One is that if you don't take an interest in politics, politics will take an interest in you, and especially your wallet.
Yeah,
when we're at an election at a pre-polling booth or even on election day, people walk up and say, I've got to vote.
Yeah.
10 minutes out of your life,
mm-hmm.
once every 3 years for the federal and once every 4 years for the state, and you're bitching about that, and then he walks inside and draws a dick and some balls on the paper. That's it, So he didn't vote anyway. So he basically gave his vote to the Liberal Labor Uni Party. Then on Monday he walks out and says,
bloody taxes, or
we've got the Labor Party back, or whatever. Take an interest, mate. That's where you've got to take an interest. But the other thing is, I want to echo what you said about people who have to work for a living. When I graduated from university with a Bachelor of Engineering honours degree in mining, I decided I better go and learn something. So I started working at the coalface, and I worked at the coalface for 3 years. Then I went overseas and worked in various states in the United States and travelled. And then I came back and I rose pretty rapidly through the ranks. But the best education I got was not the university; it was the coalface. You learn about people, you learn about practicalities of working underground, different geology, and so on. But
staying alive.
Yeah, but I'll give you an example. Person I know pretty well. He's close to our family. He went to first year uni, and he did really well. But he said, "This is not for me." So he left, and he started developing his own little small business. And then he went overseas to get more experience, and he got a job as an intern, so working for free at a company that was involved with his small business industry. And then they thought so much of him that they appointed him as an engineer. No qualifications, but he's got a good brain. Very practical with his hands and his head. And then COVID hit, so he said, "No, I'm going home to Australia." And he went back to Australia, and he said, "Now what do I do?" So he signed up to go to University of Queensland to do engineering because he thought, I better get the qualifications.
Yeah.
They put the injection mandates on.
Yeah.
He said that at the university. And he went out to construction site got a job in construction and said, "What about masks, mate?" And they said, "Oh, off."
Yeah.
Good. What about the injections? Off. These people know what's happening.
Yeah.
They have got no fancy education by academic standards, but they know which way the world works. They know they weren't fooled by the injection propaganda. They weren't fooled by the COVID propaganda. They just looked with their eyes and ears and listened and watched and saw what was going on, read a few newspapers every now and then, and they had far better decision-making power than some of the top doctors in this country, some of the top lawyers in this country who are completely lost. They're living in pixie land. And so I think we just need to get back to basics. That's basically the moral of that story. You need to get back to basics. That's why Pauline and I go out and listen a lot, because you learn from the people.
100%, yeah.
It's
especially the working class, like they hold up the backbone of our nation.
And you know, when I worked as a miner, I might quite often it was night shift because that was where the junior people went on the mines in New South Wales. But once a week, I'd go and visit. I'd call up another mine and say, "Can I come and visit you?" And they'd say, "Sure," because you got to get the experience. And the more questions you ask of people, the more they respond enthusiastically and tell you all the warts, all the bloody good points they had. They tell you everything. You just learn so much from people.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a huge difference in just a book smart for like you said, a piece of paper to the real world. I think the most, even the most successful people, entrepreneurs and whatnot, they always talk about their experiences of working, whether it was in McDonald's at 16 or whether it was more valuable to them than an actual degree. The degree gives you some knowledge, but you still need to know how to deal with people, implementing that, working with teams, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you show a bit of interest, like walking around with a team leader underground, just doing their remote area returns. Their inspections underground. I won't tell you the technical name, but walking around and you just engage them and you take an interest and you just say, "Can you tell me more about that?" And they go, "Well, let me show you this." I fuck up, basically
contraption or this or that. Yeah.
This don't do this, and they come and do that this way. People are just so willing to share.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, especially passionate people. Just finally, we'll wrap up on this, but how do you handle when the strategic uniform media campaigns basically to label any dissenting party or politician that's not on the mainstream doctrine? How do you handle it? I mean, we know Pauline's a fighter, obviously, so we know how she's handled it. But how do you find that? Like, what are your thoughts around it? I'm sure you've probably got Cooker, you've probably got QAnon conspiracy theories, all this kind of stuff. Whenever but it's amazing how it becomes. There's like when you say something controversial about the vax, like obviously vax mandates, you're against it, think it's fraudulent, all that, and then there'll just be a strategic campaign that just all the mass media just managed to all have the same kind of rhetoric within a 24-hour
Funny
period.
That, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts? And you just think that's just the duopoly of the Liberal Labor?
Well, it's actually a uni party. I used to call them a duopoly, but they're the same thing.
Yeah,
it's easy. My parents taught me to tell the truth, and I'm with Pauline, so she and I may disagree at times, but we actually come back to the data, and whichever way the data goes, that's the way we go.
Yeah.
So tell the truth, and they can't hurt you. There's a story about a bomber pilot flying over, it's a well-known story, flying over Germany, and he says, the flak starts coming. We must be close to the target.
Yeah.
So when they start giving names and labels and calling me names and labels, that means I'm on the money. I just keep going. But the other thing, so labels are the refuge of the ignorant, the incompetent, the stupid. So what I usually say to people is thanks for calling me a label, anti-vaxxer, whatever it was.
That's my question.
Climate denier, but you've just confirmed that you don't have an argument.
Yeah.
Because if you did have, you would have given it to me and I would have walked away with my tail between my legs. But you haven't got an argument, so I win. So thanks for declaring me the winner. But the other thing is I do Vipassana meditation for an hour and 10 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening.
What sort of meditation?
Vipassana.
Okay.
It was developed by the Buddha, and Buddha, I'm Christian, but Buddha and Christ shared many, many fine qualities. one of those things was they both said, don't form a religion after me.
Yep.
Both had a religion formed after them. Buddha did not form Buddhism. I happen to admire the Buddhists, like I happen to admire good Christians as well. But it's a form of meditation that that is done extremely still, and it just enables us to recognize our patterns of behavior. You say something to me, I might react. That's my fault.
Yep.
My responsibility. So it makes me
one with self.
I would not survive in Parliament because I'm a pretty serious sort of person. I'm a pretty dedicated sort of person. I would not survive in Parliament without Vipassana meditation.
Yep.
It's non-sectarian, but it's just wonderfully cleansing. So that's just VIPASSANA.
I'll look it up.
It's done all around the world. It's been rapidly growing. It was developed 2,500 years ago, but it's just for me, it's
interesting.
Ideal.
Just to finish, Australia's future. I'll try to finish on a hopefully positive note. I mean, somewhat, but how else can we help and change outcomes? I know you said go to your local MPs, go to write to your politicians and whatnot.
Share our material, Andrew.
Yep.
And this is what you're doing, giving me a platform here, but share our material. People out there watching, share our material, share our videos. Some of our videos have jerked people into gear overseas against the World Health Organization pandemic treaty, for example.
Yep.
We were the first to come out and expose that. Some of the other things, we stopped the cash ban bill. So get our word out. The videos we made on digital ID, and we made 7 videos. They've gone around the world, and they've woken people everywhere. So share our material. That's one way. But the other way, did you want to ask?
Yeah, no, I mean, but like they say, you need citizens to participate, but you come back to it's hard to participate when bills can continue to be passed without public say. So people, how do you counteract that? I know you can write to your politicians, but say there's a bill being passed that probably had no say on. Like, what the hell? And you write a letter, but it's still going to get passed. So then people are like, is my letter still? Is there a point to it? Or,
the more people you get in. I wrote letters for. Let's see, before I got into the Senate, from 2007 till 2016, I wrote letters, sometimes registered post letters with just facts on climate. And I knew most of them. Most parliamentarians are weak, ignorant, and gutless. People don't go to a politician and say, what's your opinion of this? Because there's nothing special about most politicians, nothing special at all. So don't put them up on the top shelf, put them on the floor. Think for yourself, share our videos, share our material, ask questions of your mates, your work colleagues, your family, your friends, social groups, church groups, whatever. Just spread the word to get more people to waken up, because our country has got enormous potential. It's when you look at our energy resources, Andrew, we're number 1 in the world per person. Gas, coal. You look at our water resources, our soil, our climate. We can grow almost. We're better climate than California, and we can grow almost anything, anytime. We've got a huge market above us in Asia, the world's biggest market. We've got enormous potential, enormous opportunity. We've got fantastic people. Our education is destroying a lot of people nowadays, but we can recover that. So we should be number 1 in the world. In fact, we were number 1 per capita income in 120 years ago. Mm-hmm. We're now heading for 20th. So we're sliding despite having the best resources in the world. That's because of government, but it's because the people haven't been holding government accountable. So really question how you vote. But the number 1 thing I think I would say to people is believe in yourself, because what's happened is that under public education in this country, we have been dumbed down and we've been told to rely on government, not ourselves.
Exactly.
So that's very, very important. Remember that our species is truly remarkable, and the majority of people care enormously. The majority of people are worthy of respect. Those that sometimes go off the rails, they only do so briefly, intermittently. They're still decent people. There's only a few dickheads in society, and we've got to watch out for them, and most of them are in politics. So no, I'm serious. We have got to start thinking positively about our species because and our potential, because the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the Club of Rome have been telling us repeatedly, brainwashing us that we're evil, greedy, rapacious, uncaring, unkind. We're not. We've got to start realizing that humans are just wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's good in everyone. There's a minority, small minority, like you said, that ruin it for everyone else. But and that the other thing is have conversations. I mean, that's what the whole point of this podcast and starting this is. It's funny. It's hard to get a lot of politicians and people. I've put some other requests in with certain sides of politics that are like, we can't do 2 hours, 3 hours. We might say something silly. So hopefully you coming forward, showing that you can have these conversations in good faith and agree to disagree, have different points of view, I think is very important. Having conversations with friends, like you said, church groups, whatever, respectfully. I think that's a part of being an adult. I think when you're a child, having opinions is hard because you want to get argy-bargy and all that, but part of growing into an adult is saying, okay, I disagree with you on this, let's discuss it, instead of saying, you're an idiot or you're a cooker or you're this, which is basically 90% of social media. One final one I'll finish with. Now, I know what you want it to, what you'd want it to be, but do you think there'll ever be a day, and how soon is that day where it won't be Liberal versus Labor every year? Do you think we're far from it?
No, I don't think we are. We have got the current government is in power with less than a third of the vote in the lower house. The Liberal Party is down to around 34, 35%, the Labor Party under 33%. We've got the Greens sadly rising in vote to around about 12, 13%. We've got One Nation at around about 7% and growing. We've now got, One Nation's now got, the Greens I say sadly because they're the most destructive force in Australian politics, without a doubt. They're anti-human. Their policies are entirely under the bullshit of protecting the planet when they're actually harming the planet, harming the environment. One Nation's at a position where we've now got one member of parliament at least in every mainland federal and state parliament. Mm-hmm. And we came very close to having 5 senators instead of just Pauline and me last election. And if we'd had 5, we'd be saving this country from a lot of the crap they're now going through thanks to David Pocock and the Greens. But I think more of the smaller parties are starting to fall over and merge into us. So that means we've got, just like the Greens are on the socialist side of the Labor Party, stealing some Labor votes, we've got One Nation now starting to be a viable force against the Liberals.
Yep.
And so we've got a real alternative to the Labor and Liberal uni party.
Yep. So do you think if you had to call it today, put your money on it, how soon do you think it would be possible for one of those parties to get up and take over or form they're away from Liberal or Labor?
They're probably two steps there. The first one is getting balance of power.
Yep.
In Queensland, that's extremely important, Andrew, because there's no upper house. Queensland's the only state parliament where there's no Senate, no upper house. And that means that the Labor Party can push through bills, whatever it wants.
Yeah,
it's just
free reign.
So first thing is to get probably a small group of MPs into Queensland. We've got 1 at the moment only. If we could have 5 or 6, we'd probably have the balance of power.
Okay.
So that means we could, whichever party has the most seats would need us to form government.
Yep.
And so we might not join them in a coalition, but what we would say is, if you want this passed, revoke this. If you want this passed, turn that around, do this. That's where we're very close to in the Senate. With just a few more people in the Senate, we'd be able to do that. So that would be the balance of power. Doesn't give us power, but it gives us the ability to knock back abuses of power.
Yep.
All right. So that makes us more of a guardian, more of a brake on the socialization of this country. But then ultimate power, getting into government, that's going to take quite a while.
Yep. Okay. All right. I hope this was informative for most people listening out there. Try to discuss numerous different topics and
just covered a few.
Yeah. I mean, I like having these conversations and getting different people's point of view. Like I said, I just wish we could get more people from other sides, other points of view and whatnot, and have healthy debates. But I think it's important for people to hear these kinds of things, listening in their car and doing whatever, and just hopefully it engages them into thinking about, like you said, when's the next election? When can I vote next? Like you said, it's 10 minutes on the day, and I'd probably argue it's maybe an hour of research or 2 hours of research all up. leading into that.
You can do your research as you're reading the paper or doing
Exactly.
your internet.
As you're going, but of hard research, maybe you might not know 2 or 3 of the candidates or 4. You maybe spend an hour before you go to the voting booth and just be like, oh, that more aligns with my values. And then obviously you can do a deep dive if you want to go that deep. Some people go more rabbit hole-y, whatever you want to do. But I think, it's a couple of hours of time, in a 3-year cycle, I think is important. And if we can get more people taking it seriously, I think it helps.
Let me give you this. What's the biggest expense of most people's life?
The biggest expense would be food, right? No? Food, or in Australia, real estate.
Well, you're right. Most people, the biggest expense of their life is housing.
Yeah.
That's the answer. But it's bullshit. Because Joe Hockey, the treasurer in 2015, I think, said you work from January to June to pay taxes, because most people pay around 50% tax overall. When you look at levies, fees, charges, rates, state.
Well, one of the most taxed countries in the world. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But with state, when you add it all together, you're working for half the year to pay taxes. Some figures that were around in the late 1990s, early 2000s said it's actually 68%. You pay to government. 68%. Rates, fees, levies, charges, taxes, special taxes. Yeah, and then sometimes you're paying taxes on taxes. You pay GST on top of a bill that's already including stamp duty or whatever. Yeah. So you're getting hammered. So the biggest cost of your life is government.
Yeah.
Not real estate. Real estate's not even close. So if you're a person on the average income in late 1990s, I haven't had this verified, I must do that. We know it's at least 50%, because Joe Hockey, the treasurer, said that. Could be as much as 68%, a person on the average income. So a person on the average income is working from Monday to Thursday smoko.
Yeah.
Paying for government. The rest of the time has to come for your education, your car, your traveling, your housing, your education, your holidays, putting kids, a bit away for retirement, your kids, food, etc. So you get to live on 32%.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
It's crazy.
Completely wrong. And it's because we haven't taken an interest in government, and government's taken an interest in us.
Yeah.
And they're not working for us, they're working for multinationals.
Hold them accountable. Right.
Yep.
Senator Malcolm Roberts, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.